Part 59. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi-san. Chapter 609. However, how to get in touch with the fleet is a problem. Ian's equipment had all been wiped out during the airborne landing, and it was impossible to have equipment in the exile camp that was powerful enough to communicate with the fleet dozens of kilometers away and thousands of meters in the air. As for the marine troops surrounding this area, the actual horizontal distance is more than 20,000 meters away from Kaylan, which is already twice the maximum communication distance of portable military radio walkie-talkies. The fastest way to contact them is to run to the surface and actively enter the surveillance range of the Marine Corps, but there is an obvious problem with this. The Marine Corps can only monitor the drone from the surveillance screen or seeing himself in the telescope. It was difficult for Kaylan to express his meaning clearly with gestures alone. As for asking the Marines to come over to meet him and then contact the fleet, it would take more than 10 minutes to waste. Based on the growth rate of the piles of rotten meat in front of us, by the time the fleet aims its main guns here, Dr. Rene may have become a meat mountain dozens of meters high, and it will be much more troublesome to deal with. As long as one cell in its body can escape, endless trouble will be left behind. It would be even worse if these surviving cells were later recycled by the heretical sect. Since we want to kill, we must kill thoroughly, and we must avoid future troubles forever. If it doesn't work, we can only apply for the use of strategic-level nuclear weapons, or, simply let ARC's main gun fire another round. Anyway, this area happens to be within the range of the main gun. Kaylan thought in his mind, if the situation gets out of control, this is indeed a simple and crude solution, but another problem arises. With the power of the ARC's main gun, the Marines are now in dangerous areas. To retreat to a safe zone, you have to retreat at least hundreds of kilometers away, and this retreat will take several hours. If the people from the heretical sect took advantage of this opportunity to recover part of Dr. Rene's body tissue, then everything Kaylan did today would be in vain. Time, it's a matter of time again. Kaylan couldn't help but clenched his fists and thought quickly. If I can find some scrap electronic parts, I can make a simple radio station by myself, but just walking all the way, it seems that I didn't see anything like electronic equipment at all. This group of exiles are even so poor. Not even an old radio. Wait a minute. Ian's eyes suddenly lit up, and he remembered something. The walker at a one bipedal mecha guarding outside the cave. Although this old-fashioned mecha does not use the intelligent operating system that comes standard with modern mechas, it must have electronic communication equipment. Otherwise, the pilot sitting in the closed cockpit would not be able to hear the commander's orders and interact with friendly forces. The synergy between them is even more impossible to talk about. I hope the heretic sect didn't dismantle the communication equipment in the mecha. Kaylan immediately turned around and ran towards the entrance of the cave. He quickly ran to the mecha disguised as a big rock, and with a few clicks of his bloody claws, he removed the cockpit hatch, and then pulled out the body inside. There was a strong smell of blood in the cockpit. Because the heater was on, the plasma flowing out of the corpse did not coagulate and flowed almost everywhere. There was a thick layer of blood on the foot pedal at the bottom of the cockpit. A thick layer. Kaylan glanced around the cockpit, and soon his eyes rested on a microphone hanging on the right side of the driver's seat. He reached out to grab it, but the black microphone suddenly shattered. This has something to do with Ian's current physical strength being too strong, but the main reason is that this communication device is too old. The black plastic shell has been severely aged and is so fragile that it breaks at a touch. The pilots of the heretic sect don't use this communication device at all on weekdays, and naturally they won't replace it with a new casing. Fortunately, the microphone inside is made of metal and is not rusty. There is only a thin layer of oxide on the surface. Kaylan used the tip of his claw as a knife and pried off the cover plate where the microphone was connected. Along the way, he took out the entire communication device hidden in the gap between the cabin and the armor. This communication device looks like it has not been used for decades, but fortunately the main components are still intact. The most sophisticated circuit boards are also well installed in a resin protective case. The four corners of the protective case are, although the screws are extremely rusty, the condition of the circuit board is almost as good as new. I connected several broken wires respectively, and briefly repaired the earphones. I scraped off the rust on the electromagnet coil and wrapped it again. Finally, connect the entire communication device to the battery under the seat. Suddenly, a burst of blah 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 sound of electricity came from the earphones. It's done. Kaylan was overjoyed and turned the FM knob in a very small amount. Unlike today's smart devices that only need to enter the communication channel code to complete the connection, this antique is just like the old radio, you have to manually adjust the frequency band. And it's still impossible to decipher the encrypted code. Coupled with the electromagnetic interference that was strong and weak in the wilderness, it took him nearly 5 minutes to find the public channel of Fleet Zero. As soon as he said a word, he was immediately questioned. Please report your unit and identification number immediately, and explain the reason for using this frequency band, otherwise we will lock your location. Lock it quickly. Hurry. Ian's reaction made the communications soldier on the fleet obviously stunned. This was the first time he heard such an outrageous request. At first, he thought that someone from a heretical sect had mistakenly entered the fleet's public channel. After all, this frequency band was not encrypted, but judging from the other party's tone, it was obvious that he had not entered by mistake. Please report your affiliation immediately. The signal soldier was about to repeat what he said just now, but Kaylan interrupted him impatiently. Stop the humming process of breaking the competition. I am Kaylan. Put Yevgeny on the phone. Kaylan. Captain Kaylan. Faintly, Kaylan seemed to hear the sound of the heels of his boots colliding when he stood at attention on the other end of the receiver. Although not everyone in the Zero fleet has met Kaylan, everyone knows Ian's name. After all, he is the captain of Yagunactor, and the entire Zero fleet, they were all established for this ancient battleship, and Kaylan was truly the number one of this fleet. Don't waste time. The situation is urgent. Get Yevgeny over immediately. But, even if you are Captain Kaylan, I still have to verify your identity before. Identification code XXXXXXXXXX. Okay, give the intercom to Yevgeny quickly. In less than 15 seconds, the voice on the other side of the receiver changed from the young communications soldier to Colonel Yevgeny, who spoke Russian Chinese with a thick accent. Colonel Yevgeny, have you locked my position now? Kaylan asked as soon as he opened his mouth. Report to Captain K, the lock has been completed. The coordinates of your current location are E04554, C19062, which happens to be exactly in the ravine where we found signs of the exiles' activities. Yes, this is the coordinate. Wait a minute, the exact location should be a little bit in the inner southwest. You can fine-tune the coordinates, probably change it to something like E04552, C19061, and first release 8 rounds of ground-penetrating bombs. At this point we need that kind of ground-penetrating bomb with a tactical nuclear warhead. After blasting the surface of the ground, we will use a plasma cannon to carry out a covering saturation strike, and finally use napalm to wash the ground again. Do you understand? What did you say? Yevgeny was confused for a moment. Ian's order was tantamount to telling him to shoot at me, and when Yevgeny and others received the order in the secret order, protecting Ian's safety and protecting Yagunactor are at the same priority. Even if Kaylan puts a gun to his head now, he would never dare to issue such an order. I asked you to level this place quickly. No, dig 3 feet into the ground and evaporate the things under the ground. Otherwise, things will be in trouble, Kaylan yelled into the microphone. What? What's under the ground? It's hard for me to explain to you clearly in a few words on the phone, but you just need to know that it is an extremely troublesome thing. Believe me, if I were a member of the undead crew, they would also agree with my decision. Yes. Hurry up and start charging the plasma cannon when launching the missile. The longer it takes, the harder it will be to destroy it. Kaylan estimated that between the time he ran out of the cave and the time he connected with Fleet Zero, the size of the thing had probably expanded several times. The larger the size, the larger the amount of debris that would be splashed out when bombed. The more there are, if a piece of tissue fragments has flown more than 10 kilometers away and has not been burned by plasma cannons and incendiary bombs, then trying to find it is like looking for a needle in a haystack. But, what about your safety? Will you have time to leave the bombing area? Yevgeny asked. Don't worry, I will definitely be able to escape from the bombing area in time, as long as your bombs don't get lost. Okay. I will reserve 20 minutes for you to evacuate the bombing area. Please hurry up. 20 minutes is too late. 120 seconds is enough. The bombing will begin in 120 seconds. Don't delay. If you dare to disobey, I know that threatening you with shooting is useless, but I can to tell you the truth, if you disobey, the consequences will be beyond your imagination. Kaylan glanced back at the dark cave beside him and shouted the last words into the microphone, "Don't ask anything. Every time you ask a word, you are wasting my time to escape. 2 minutes. Now start the countdown." After saying that, Kaylan dropped the communication device, climbed on top of the mecha, jumped out of the ravine. As he got closer, he started running towards the northeast. As he ran, he silently counted down the countdown in his mind. 119, 118. With the blessing of active armor, K-Ian's running speed is no less than that of a Junius armored off-road vehicle speeding on a flat area. However, it is still quite difficult to run out of the scope of the explosion within 2 minutes. Difficult. 90, 89, 75, 74, 46, 45. When the countdown reached 45, Kaylan stopped. He knew that even if he ran for 45 seconds, it would be difficult to reach a safe zone. He simply squatted down and started digging a hole in the ground. 29, 28. A shallow pit nearly half a meter deep soon appeared on the ground. As for the dugout's oil, all of it was pushed to the side close to the bombing area. 15, 14, 13. Kaylan took a deep breath, then lay face up in the pit. 3, 2, 1. As soon as the last number was counted, Kaylan saw more than a dozen missiles flying from a distance with white trails behind them. After reaching the marked point, these missiles turned their warheads and drilled vertically downward into the ground. The dull sound of explosions came from the underground as the ground shook violently. The active armor on K-Ian's body immediately generated a large number of hollow blood bubbles, lifting his body up to prevent his internal organs from being destroyed by this force. It was shattered by the terrifying power. There are still 7 rounds, Kaylan thought silently in his heart. Although he could not see the bombing area from this angle, the sound alone was enough to make people feel that more than a dozen tactical nuclear warheads were exploding deep underground at the same time. The power produced. Another round of missiles pierced the sky, and wave after wave of heat waves hit from above. The sand and soil that Kaylan piled beside the pit had already been blown away, and a large part of it was blown back into the pit. Most of his body was buried. The sand contained scorching heat. Kaylan felt like he was in an oven. The method of wrapping the sand and then heating it reminded him of a food called salt baking. The processing method, this is still several kilometers away from the bombing point. As for the underground laboratory that was directly hit by the missile, it is estimated that nothing is left. Logically speaking, 8 rounds of nuclear strikes are enough to destroy DNA to the point where nothing is left, but to be on the safe side, Kaylan still feels that it is better to increase the intensity, perhaps, phobia of insufficient firepower. This problem is already deeply ingrained in the genes of every descendant of China, right? What came after the ground-penetrating missiles were plasma cannons that were like materialized laser beams. These plasmas emitted extremely dazzling light. Even if K'Lan closed his eyes, the strong light could still be projected through the gaps in the armor and eyelids. On his retinas, his vision was reflected in bright white. The bright light lasted for several seconds before dimming, and it took K'Lan 5 times as long for his eyes to return to normal. Shaking off the sand and soil from his body, he climbed out of the shallow pit, turned around and looked towards the bombing zone. He saw a large pit with a completely glass-like texture. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi San. Chapter 610. The diameter of the large glass pit is nearly 10 kilometers, and the deepest part K'Lan visually measured is 400 to 500 meters deep. The deepest parts of the previous rock ravines were only 100 meters, and the underground ruins hidden in the rock walls are almost at this depth. But now, those tunnels and underground laboratories have completely disappeared from this world. Those sandstones were directly melted in the high temperature of millions of degrees Celsius, and the water or other impurities in them were evaporated in a blink of an eye, and what was left behind was converted into this glass-like material, which was exposed in the sunlight. Under the reflection, it reflects the colorful brilliance. But it wasn't over yet. 5 high-speed bombers quickly flew over the glass pit in an arrow formation, and dense black dots fell from the sky. From K'Ian's perspective, they were just black dots the size of sesame seeds, but in fact, each black dot is an incendiary bomb with a maximum diameter of 65 centimeters, a central axis length of 1.4 meters, and a weight of 122 kilograms. It is filled with new solid gasoline with an improved formula. Just one drop of this thing is enough to burn a big hole through the front and back of a person's body. Hundreds of incendiary bombs were dumped into this large glass pit, a fire curtain hundreds of meters high rose into the sky, and hot air waves hit K'Ian's face. Of course, compared to the nuclear warhead explosion and plasma just now, the high temperature generated when the cannon burns the glass, this heat wave can only be regarded as the spring breeze blowing on his face. K'Lan did not remove the active armor on his body, anyway. His appearance has been seen by everyone in Fleet Zero. Instead of going back naked now, it is better to maintain this monster-like state. There is a saying, activity. The appearance of the armor is actually quite in line with human aesthetics. It is somewhat similar to the heavy armor with exaggerated art styles in fantasy online games, especially the sharp spikes and barbs that look very thorny. However, K'Lan has always wanted to complain about this type of armor. Even if those heavily armored warriors wear them like this, why are the equipment of many beautiful characters also designed in this style? If the artists of those games used the same type of armor for men and women, that would be fine, but they still have to make magic changes in the style, designing the armor to look like a bikini swimsuit. They can't wait to put all the things on the female characters that can pass the review. All parts of the armor are exposed. The thorny armor and the large areas of exposed white skin do have a strong visual impact and contrast effect, but if such a set of armor really exists in the real world, the wearer can make any number of them. His body was already dripping with blood from those sharp thorns and barbs, right? But for games, as long as they are enough to be shot, it will be fine. After all, the less you wear, the higher your defense. I must have something wrong with my brain when pursuing realism in a virtual world. K'Lan stretched out his hand and put it on his head. He tapped his helmet twice and strode towards the group of Marines standing in the safe zone in the distance. The expressions of the Marines seemed a little nervous. Although no one pointed their guns at K'Lan, many of them had their fingers tightly pressed against the trigger guard. There were even a few who ignored the discipline in the army. Whispering, "No need to think about it," the content of their discussion must be the strange dark red armor on K'Lan. Is it Mr. K'Lan?" Major General Alexander, who was dressed almost the same as other Marines, stood up and asked. Although he knew that the person in front of him was probably the too young number 1 of Fleet Zero, he still felt a little uneasy when the other person appeared in this image. It's me. Kaylan nodded. The visor on his face split into several pieces and then penetrated under the skin. He noticed that after seeing his face, whether it was Alexander or those land warriors, the tension and vigilance in the eyes of the team members have eased a lot, and their tense bodies have also relaxed. This. Major General Alexander was about to ask something, but as soon as he said the word this, he paused. Among the officers and soldiers of Fleet Zero, he should be the one who knows the details of Kaylan best. He naturally also knows that anything that requires Kaylan to personally take action must be the highest level secret. The previous sentence was often criticized by the undead crew. What members of the association used to deal with Kaylan is also very suitable for the Major General. Things that you should know will naturally be revealed to you, and things that you shouldn't know will be useless even if you ask. Although the Major General's heart is really itching, but he has reached this level and is entrusted with such an important task, he can still keep his mouth shut. Don't ask about things you shouldn't know, and don't ask about things you shouldn't know, even if you know them, treat them as if you don't know them. Only in this way can the seat under the buttocks sit securely. Kaylan looked at the slight expression on the Major General's face, coughed, and said close to his ear, "The heretical sect kidnapped and killed Dr. Renee, and used Dr. Renee's research results to create a new type of biological weapon. The recovery ability of that thing is too strong. I can't kill it, I can only call the fleet's heavy firepower." I understand," Major General Alexander nodded quickly. "Then how do I report this matter? Does it need to be registered within the fleet? Anyway, the first problem has been solved. Let everything follow the fixed procedures." Kaylan glanced at Alexander and found that the other person was using the corner of his eye to glance at the active armor on his body, so he asked directly, Are you curious about my equipment?" "Yes, no, I'm not curious." Major General Alexander immediately looked away and said confidently. "Actually, it's just a kind of high-tech power armor, but its appearance is rather exaggerated." Kaylan patted the other party's shoulder kindly. "If any of the soldiers feel strange, just explain it to them like this." Clear. Kaylan didn't want to explain too much about this. As for the confidentiality, he left it to the guys from the Undead Crew Club to deal with the headache. "By the way, there's one more thing." "What's the matter?" "Tell me." Major General Alexander's attitude was very respectful. As an ARC executive who knew that the undead crew would exist, he knew very well how powerful the people who were associated with this organization would be. Even though the general star on the shoulder is almost unattainable in the eyes of civilians and soldiers, but in the eyes of the Undead Crew Association, there is actually not much difference between a general and a soldier. Don't disband the search team yet. With the bombing area as the center, conduct a radial search in all directions. In addition, establish a blockade in the surrounding area to prevent any unrelated people from approaching, whether it is heretical sects, exiles or hunters from the Ark, mercenaries, even people from the field troops. Do you want to be let in? Didn't you just say that Dr. Renee has been killed by people from the heretical sect? Then what are we searching for? The remains of that monster." Kaylan said seriously. "Even if it is a drop of blood or a strand of hair, as long as such things are found around the bombing area, they must be reported immediately." "Wreckage." Major General Alexander's expression changed slightly. He couldn't help but look over Ian's shoulder and towards the large glass pit in the distance. It was hard for him to imagine that under such a bombardment, the monster could still remain. What wreckage? Could it be that the thing underneath is a primitive species similar to Leviathan? That's not right either. If it was a prehistoric species, it should not be able to solve it with such firepower alone. Theoretically, there shouldn't even be any debris left in that thing, but for the sake of safety, it's better to be cautious." Kaylan said, "I'm afraid that there will be tiny tissue fragments during the first round of bombing. If it is lifted high into the sky and then carried far away by the wind, the situation will be troublesome." "Is that thing very dangerous?" Alexander then asked. Do we need to equip the soldiers with biological and chemical protective equipment? In Alexander's opinion, the monster Kaylan mentioned must be completely dead. But since Kaylan cares so much about the remains of this monster, maybe even the remains of this monster are dangerous. When he thought of this, Alexander naturally thought of seeds of erosion, alien viruses and the like thing, and if the soldiers were accidentally infected during the search, things might only get worse. It's best to match it. Kaylan nodded in agreement. Alexander's suggestion added a lot to his image in Ian's mind. A person who can notice every detail like this is it's worth entrusting him with the responsibility. To be honest, I don't know the specific danger level of this thing, but it has a very strong proliferation ability. As long as one cell survives, it will recover in a short time. Do you understand what I mean? So that's it. A flash of surprise flashed in Alexander's eyes, and he nodded solemnly. Then you really need to send someone to search the surrounding area. Okay, I'll leave this matter to you. I'll go back to the fleet first. In addition, if you are short of manpower or need technical support, you can find the people above yourself. I don't like dealing with those guys. Just like the Riddler, he can't even speak a human word. Okay. Alexander's eyes twitched suddenly, and he stretched out his hand to wipe the non-existent cold sweat on his forehead. Hearing Kaylan describe the people of the undead crew in this way, he was almost frightened to death, but this has never happened. Another angle proves Ian's ability. A guy who can complain about the crew and still be fine is obviously not something that ordinary people can afford to offend. After leaving all the butt-wiping matters to Major General Alexander, Kaylan put on a Marine combat uniform and boarded the plane sent by the fleet to pick him up. As soon as he entered the cabin, Kaylan was happy. The two pilots flying the plane this time happened to be the two people who drove the transport plane in the last stewardess incident. Kaylan kept his promise afterwards and only fired Colonel Roland and several of his officers who participated in the incident. As for the two pilots, he did not hold any responsibility and just transferred them to on top of another battleship. I just didn't expect such a coincidence that the plane that came to pick me up this time was actually driven by the two of them. Kaylan walked to the cockpit very familiarly, picked up the water glass placed next to the driver's seat, and drank all the water in it. The edge of the bombing zone was no different from an oven. Kaylan felt that all the water in his body had been evaporated. Now even if he was given a 10-liter bucket of drinking water, he felt that he could drink it all in one breath. Sir, this is my cup. Just when the lieutenant wanted to remind Kaylan, he was slapped hard on the arm by his companion. The latter immediately apologized and said with a smile, "Sir, if you are thirsty, there is something in the cabin behind. There are drinks in the freezer, including wine, tea, coffee, and juice." "Okay, I'll get it myself." Kaylan nodded and patted the two of them lightly on the shoulders. "It's a coincidence that you two have met again." It's a coincidence that we were specially sent to pick you up." Colonel Yevgeny said, "There are so many pilots in the entire fleet, but the two of us are the most familiar with you." The captain, who just interrupted his companion, smiled bitterly. Then he said, "We haven't had time to thank you for exempting us from responsibility last time. Otherwise, the two of us may not be able to stay in the army. I know that's Colonel Roland's order, and there's nothing you can do about it. But next time something like this happens, remember to report it," Kaylan said. "To tell you the truth, it's not that we don't want to report this kind of thing, but that," the pilot captain sighed heavily and hesitated to speak. "Just tell me, I won't mind." Kaylan leaned against the door frame of the cab and said while drinking the carbonated drink he had just taken out of the freezer. "The reason why we didn't dare to report it was because at that time, we didn't know what kind of person you were." Although the pilot spoke very implicitly and euphemistically, Kaylan understood what he meant. "I see, you are worried that I am actually good at this, but reporting it will ruin my good deeds, so you choose to remain silent, right?" Yes, it's great that you understand," the pilot responded hurriedly, As for those bastards installing cameras on the plane, we really don't know, we were not originally flying that plane to pick him up. Your mission was received only an hour before departure. If we knew that someone installed this thing on the plane, we would never continue to remain silent. The ground crew responsible for inspecting the aircraft has been sent to prison. Judging from his confession, you did not know anything about it. Kaylan nodded, but there is one thing I am curious about. Something like this, does it mean that things like bribery happen very frequently? It's not high, but we don't dare to bet, the pilot said honestly. Those big shots, even if they don't accept bribes, they won't do what you did. Like me? It means making things bigger, right? Well. The pilot's voice was a little lower. Even if they refuse, they will treat it as if it has never happened. After all, we are all in the same system. We can't see each other without looking up. If we break up, it's not good for anyone. But if we encounter a big shot like that, who wants to take advantage of it, and a good thing is ruined because of our report, I'm afraid we'll suffer a lot afterwards. I almost understand, although those rat droppings have stinked the whole porridge, those who choose to remain silent are actually the culprits of this situation. When the water is clear, there are no fish. Kaylan knows that it will be very difficult for him to change the situation, but at least within his Zero fleet, he will never allow such a thing to happen again. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 611. Kaylan did not stay longer on the New Dawn. After eating 2 bags of instant military rations to fill his stomach, he immediately took the transport plane and flew to Agunakota. It is less than a month before the first joint exploration begins. Although he has always been the hands-off boss, there are still a lot of trivial matters that must be handled by him personally. For example, this front-line supply base built in the Yagunaktor power room, according to the scheduled construction period, it is almost time for acceptance. In order to facilitate the transportation of materials, Kaylan set up 3 semi-permanent transmission channels outside Yagunaktor. Of course, not everyone can use this channel. Only those with a transmission beacon can enter, and there are strict restrictions on the quality of things carried on them. The so-called transmission beacon is actually an empty energy crystal shell that has been specially marked. Only if you carry this beacon with you will you be transported to the core power room. As for sneaking in without a beacon or simply breaking in, those who do will be thrown into the passage that trapped Kaylan and the others for a long time. After gaining control of Agunakota, Kaylan learned that most of those passages were not actually for human passage, but the cooling ducts of this ancient warship. When the battleship's engine is running, a steady stream of hot air will be discharged into these passages. If any unlucky guy is transported into these heat dissipation ducts at this time, it is estimated that he will be completely inside and outside in a few seconds. The outside was cooked. These 3 transmission channels are located at the top of Yagunaktor. Fleet Zero built 4 aprons and a large unloading dock on this ancient battleship. The construction materials and equipment transported from the Ark they are transported to this platform by transport aircraft or small transport ships, and then stacked in categories. Finally, they are transported manually to the core power room of Agunaktor. According to the cargo throughput of this unloading dock, all the materials for building a frontline supply base can actually be in place in half a day, but these materials are stuck at the last step of the transportation process. Each worker can only carry at most a load including weight and weight. A total of 450 kilograms of materials, including its own equipment, entered the transmission channel. As a result, the efficiency of transportation dropped instantly. This is like installing a flow control valve on the mouth of a water pipe that is spraying like crazy. With the current efficiency, it is estimated that it will take more than a month just to move the materials stacked on the platform, let alone build a base. There is nothing that can be done about it. Only by strictly controlling access can we prevent spies from heretical sects from sneaking in. Fortunately, the training and running in of personnel on the other side will also take a while. By the time the people from the Soma Consortium and the Ye Family Consortium arrive at Yagunakiter, the progress of the project here should be only about 77%. Kaylan randomly picked a passage and entered the core power room. The first thing that appeared in his field of vision was a construction site covering an area of more than 40,000 square meters. The basic framework made of spliced alloy tubes has been completed, but most of the buildings have not had time to install walls. Less than 1/5 of the houses have closed rooms, but even so, the general appearance of the base has been revealed. It's like a mecha. The skeleton has been completed, and all that's left is to fill it in with various equipment and armor. These projects were all contracted by the Ye family group. In order to build this base, the wealthy Ye family even temporarily acquired a top 3 established construction company in the industry and 6 of the highest specification steel structure production lines. Hosting the annual mecha competition has given the Ye group a wealth of experience in base construction. Coupled with this wave of support and the almost unlimited budget given by the board of directors, the design team responsible for this project was able to take off directly from the spot. The drawings that originally took half a month to complete, those bald guys finished in 2 nights. It is said that these people were so busy that they didn't even bother to eat, and they all relied on concentrated nutrient solutions and high intensity the military uses stimulants to maintain their status. Kaylan has seen the drawing. Although he only has a superficial understanding of architectural design, he can also see that the design of this base can definitely be called a masterpiece, just the one that recharges itself by absorbing escaping radiation. The protective cover is an unprecedented idea in the history of human architecture. This protective cover was the first to be built and is now in use. This is a hemispherical physical protective shield that is placed upside down on top of the entire base. The main body of the protective shield is made of more than 20 million energy-exhausted crystals, connected by a deciphered crystal circuit structure, and with 8 large shield generators, the entire protective shield can provide protection to the frontline supply base that is no less than the energy shield at the Institute's headquarters. Moreover, due to the use of solid crystals as the carrier of the energy shield, this protective shield has almost no overload problem. In other words, as long as the energy supply is sufficient, this shield can be maintained forever. The issue of battery life needs to be considered. Captain K, look here. This is the office area we have specially arranged for you. It is also the first room in the base to be renovated. A man wearing fluorescent construction warning clothing and an orange safety helmet led Kaylan walked into a corridor. This man is not an ordinary worker, but one of the senior engineers of the explosive design team. The 2 thick dark circles on his face make him look like the national treasure panda of China in the old era. The layer of grease accumulated from staying up all night and neglecting to wash up is so thick that you can scrape it off with your fingers. But there was no hint of exhaustion in his voice, and the excitement was so intense that Kaylan even wondered if this guy was on drugs. Oh, no need to doubt it. As soon as he walked into the corridor, Kaylan I saw several engineers who looked similar to this guy arguing fiercely around a table, and on the ground at their feet were scattered a large number of empty disposable stimulant syringes. Good guy, Kaylan counted the number of syringes and the number of engineers in this group. If they had knocked down all these drugs, everyone had injected at least 5 large-dose military stimulants in 2 days, and 1 large dose. A dose of military stimulants contains 4 standard units. Generally, the command headquarters will distribute military stimulants of this specification to soldiers only on the eve of important battles. Didn't anyone among you die suddenly? Kaylan did not look at the design drawings on the table for the first time, but asked the engineers. It's not a big problem. The first responders are waiting outside anyway. As long as they rescue you in time, you won't die, an engineer said without raising his head. Laoli and Tom rushed to the street yesterday and were carried directly to the medical cabin. but I heard that they have woken up today and are clamoring to come back. Another engineer took over the conversation. He just realized that Ian's voice was very unfamiliar. He raised his head, glanced at Lan with doubt and dissatisfaction, and shouted, "By the way, who are you? Who let you in? Didn't I say that no outsiders can enter here? You idiot." "This is Captain K," the engineer who brought Lan in immediately said. "Captain K? Which captain? Even if he is the captain of Fleet Zero, he can't enter this place just by asking." The engineer had no intention of giving in. "Marcus, you guy, you designed before there was such a huge flaw in the heating system, and I haven't even asked you to settle the matter yet. Now you bring people here again, you." Before he could finish speaking, the engineer named Marcus interrupted him. "He is the captain of this battleship." "This battleship?" The engineer who was still spitting a second ago was stunned for a moment, and the expression on his face suddenly became extremely exciting. "You mean, he is the captain of Yagunactor?" As soon as he said these words, several other engineers also raised their heads and looked at Lan. This made Lan feel a little embarrassed. He didn't know what to say to these bald men for a moment. He can't just say, "Hello, comrades, thank you for your hard work, comrades." The craziness of this group of people is comparable to that of the group at the Institute, but they are not as lawless as those researchers. The name of the acting captain of Agunakotaur is still enough to bring this group of people to a standstill. He was pressed down submissively and obediently. "Is this my office area?" Lan simply cut to the topic and asked, pointing to the door at the end of the corridor. "Yes," a clear female voice responded. Lan looked in the direction of the voice, but did not see anyone. It was not until he moved his eyes downward that he found a man who looked to be only 11 or 12 years old at most. The little girl was standing on tiptoes with her hands on the table, looking at Lan with excited eyes. She was wearing a construction suit that obviously didn't fit well, and a child-sized safety helmet on her head. There were also two huge dark circles hanging on her fair little face, just because of the angle of view. Because of the relationship, Lan didn't notice the little girl who was blocked by others. "You are still recruiting child labor here?" Lan glanced at Marcus next to him with some confusion. No, no. Miss Bianca is not an employee of the company, but the youngest daughter of our boss." Marcus lowered his voice slightly and said in Ian's ear, "She is a genius, the one outside you just saw, the physical protective cover made of waste crystals, and the original idea for that thing was proposed by Miss Bianca. But, even if she is a genius designer, she is still a minor, right? I skipped 6 grades in a row and graduated from the Department of Architecture at MIT last year. It is very stupid to judge a person's ability by age alone." The little girl glared at Lan and said angrily. The MIT she refers to is a very famous institution of higher learning on the Ark. Its predecessor is the MIT on the Earth. If the architecture department of this college claims to be the second in the world, then no school dares to claim to be the world's second. First, there is no need to elaborate on the strength. The MIT on the Ark has completely inherited the mantle of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Its architecture and engineering departments also maintain the ranking of Arks No. 1, and students who graduated from this college are admitted to the graduate school. The proportion is as high as 27%. You know, among the top 20 higher education institutions in Ark, the average proportion of graduates admitted to graduate schools is only 1.9%. As long as many schools can produce a talent who has entered the graduate school, they can use this amount when recruiting students in the second year. There is a lot of hype, but MIT will send more than 100 outstanding talents to the institute every year. Lan couldn't help but take a closer look at this talented girl who just graduated from MIT last year, and sighed inwardly. Fortunately, she was not attracted by the institute, otherwise, she would be in danger now. "That's what I said," but it is illegal for minors to use military stimulants. Ian's eyes swept over Bianca's arm intentionally or unintentionally, as if he could see through the thick construction clothes. See those needle holes on the slender arm inside? The ingredients of military stimulants contain a large amount of hormone substances. Use of these substances by minors who are still in the physical development stage will have irreversible effects on the body, especially excessive injections in a short period of time. Adults with strong bodies, no one may be able to bear it, let alone a child who is only 11 or 12 years old. I am a congenitally enhanced person, and the side effects of stimulants are basically ineffective for me, the little girl said with some pride. A congenitally enhanced person refers to a person who has undergone genetic modification during the embryonic stage and received multiple uterine injections during the mother's pregnancy. Intensive surgery in infants. This kind of people can obtain the second to third level of enhancement level as soon as they are born, and subsequent further enhancements will become easier, and the success rate is much higher than that of ordinary enhanced people. But the disadvantage is that it costs a lot, and both the mother and the fetus need to bear considerable risks. If the enhanced surgery fails, not only will the fetus be aborted, but most adults will not be able to survive it either. However, in the upper-class society of ARC, there are not many people with innate enhancements like this. In order to ensure that their offspring have superhuman qualities, some families will let the heirs of the family give up marrying other powerful people and select outstanding girls from the civilian class as spouse. There will never be just one spouse like this, there can be as few as 5 or 6, as many as a dozen. After these girls become pregnant, they will undergo such innate enhancement surgery. If it fails, her native family will receive a huge compensation. If it succeeds, her child will have the opportunity to become the future heir of the family, and she will officially become the wife of the child's father. If multiple fetuses survived the operation, the situation would be more complicated. On the internet, there is a relatively derogatory word to describe this practice, that is, raising goo. Kaylan couldn't help but look a little complicated when he looked at Bianca. Could this genius girl also be a goo in a certain voodoo? Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 612. Kaylan didn't ask any more questions. He was not the kind of person who likes to meddle in other people's private affairs. Several engineers briefly introduced the design ideas of the frontline supply base to Kaylan. This base is said to be a building complex, but it uses an integrated frame. In a sense, the entire base can be regarded as a cabin made up of layers of matryoshka dolls. When encountering danger, the entire base can be raised directly from the ground and moved to the outside of Yagunactor through the teleportation device. Ian's original main requirement for the base was that it had strong enough defense capabilities and could ideally be designed as a military fortress. However, this group of engineers went a step further and designed it into a warship with the ability to operate on its own. Yes, this base has the ability to be suspended in the air. It can even be incorporated into the battle sequence of Fleet Zero and operate together with other battleships. The reason why they designed this way is entirely because the resources at hand are too abundant. It would be too wasteful to use these resources just to build a base. Since the consortium is generous enough, these guys will just let themselves go. The standards of all materials have been raised to the highest level, so much so that the initial budget of the entire frontline supply base has reached more than 16 times the cost of the new Dawn. If it were any other party, this design plan would have been rejected as soon as it was proposed. However, the family not only did not reject the design proposal, but even gave up the production lines of its 4 factories that produce high-end mecha skeletons. It was stopped and all these resources were invested in the production of base components. It is no exaggeration to say that nearly half of the business under the family group has now been turned to serve this exploration operation. During this period, the transaction prices of nano-alloy and energy crystals on the market have been rising. Everything involving steel, the stocks of non-ferrous metals and polymers have been trading at their daily limit for many consecutive days. allowing some investors with a keen sense of smell to make a lot of money. The Ya group has completely staked its fortune on this ancient battleship from the third civilization. This is a huge gamble, and there is almost no way out. Perhaps because he was busy from the moment he opened his eyes until late at night every day during this period, Kaylan felt almost nothing. A month had passed, and it was not until Hound and the others returned to the battleship with a large group of people that he realized that the first joint exploration is about to begin. A total of 3 groups of people arrived at Agunakota today, namely the Grey Bird Hunting Group named after the Ya family group, Tide Hunting Group, and the lone hunter nicknamed 33 and his group of brothers. The hunters sent by the Grey Bird Hunting Group this time are all old faces in the rankings. It's just that these people are familiar to Kaylan and others, but they have no experience of cooperation. Every time the Grey Bird Hunting Group goes on a mission, they are all organized by their own hunters and never cooperate with outsiders. Speaking of which, this is the first non-exclusive operation of the Grey Bird Hunting Group after they became famous. These people are wearing uniform black combat uniforms, with neat equipment and clear division of labor. The leader is Ghost Owl, one of the best elite hunters in the circle and the top instructor of the Grey Bird Hunting Group. Although this guy has the title of Morning Bird, although he was nicknamed the Team, he had led the team for more than 10 years and there had never been any serious casualties. A bored netizen once launched a poll in the forum: which hunting group, or which hunter, do you most want to explore the ruins with? The Ghost Owl was ranked ahead of the third place by more than 4,000 votes, even though this is just an entertainment vote, and it is enough to prove that this person's leadership ability is recognized as excellent. As for the first place winner, although she is also a very powerful relic hunter, her abilities in all aspects are actually inferior to Ghost Owl. The reason why she received the most votes is simply because she is a beautiful woman with stunning appearance. Most of the people who voted for her were thinking animals and theatergoers. As for the hunters who voted seriously, 9 out of 10 people voted for the Ghost Owl. There is a saying that has always been circulated in the hunter circle: you are lucky to work under the boss Ghost Owl. At least your chance of surviving to retirement is several times that of other colleagues. Although the hunters of the Grey Bird Hunting Group are all quiet, the expressions on their faces are very relaxed. Whether it is their leader or themselves, this group of elites have full confidence. On the other hand, looking at the Tide Hunting Group, this group of people was obviously much more nervous, and the quality gap between them and the Grey Bird Hunting Group was clearly visible. The Tide Hunting Group is a consortium-level hunting group temporarily registered by the SOMA Consortium. However, this Tide Hunting Group has not yet completed the qualification certification. They will only be considered qualified if they successfully complete the exploration mission of Yagunakter. Official registration successful. The leader of the Tide Hunting Group is Caroline, the former first mate of the Pioneer Icebreaker, but her leader is actually a false position. As a member of the SOMA Consortium Security Department, Caroline came to Yagunakter. The main task is to protect the safety of Zofia Soma, and she will not follow others. As for the command of the Tide Hunting Group, it was given to Kaylan and the others. Kaylan glanced at the 25 people who were selected. These people were all men who had been fighting at sea all year round. Naturally, their physical fitness was needless to say, and at the end of the team, Kaylan saw 2 men who had fought before. People who deal with people. Old Bus Bartelti, who had met them once at the barbecue stall, and his immediate boss, Quinn, the deputy leader of the mechanical maintenance team. Quinn's figure looks stronger than it was then, but Lao Ba still looks lean, but his 2 robotic arms have all been replaced with the latest models produced by Mayan Bio. These young men are all of good quality. Hound calmly stood beside Kaylan and whispered in his ear, they are all good young men with strong organizational discipline. The only problem is that the training time is a bit short. Moreover, none of them have personally come into contact with the ruins. If we have enough time, we can take these people to the sea level and D-level ruins to exercise, and the situation will be much better. As the Hound spoke, he kept looking at the gray bird hunting group on the other side from the corner of his eye. Obviously, the gap between the two groups made him feel a little confused on his face. "It's okay, old dog." Kaylan saw the little thought in the hound and patted him on the shoulder. "The ones selected by Greybird are all senior hunters. How can these newcomers under our hands compare with others? Besides, this group of people are used to the wind and waves on the sea, and they are just a little uncomfortable now. You can't regard them as rookies who are leaving the Ark for the first time. Of course, if it weren't for this, I wouldn't want any of these people." Hound nodded. "Except for Lao Ba, I have carefully selected everyone else." "Didn't you choose me?" "No." The hound shook his head. "There are several better than him, but this guy just squeezed in by relying on his friendship with us for a meal. Well, but then again, I have passed several basic assessments and am only a few points lower than others. I don't think this guy is that brave, is he? Why does he have to participate in this exploration operation? Is it to get a new set of robotic arms for himself?" Kaylan asked in confusion. "Ahem, I just heard, that this guy likes a girl, but he used to be a boatman and spent whatever he earned. He didn't have any savings. He lived in Soma Consortium for free. The staff dormitories provided could not even pay for a 2-bedroom apartment, so that's why I shamelessly approached you, hoping to open a back door for him to come in, right? Oh, anyway, Lao Ba's score is not much different from others, and he knows a few of us, so it's a piece of cake. Anyway, the person who pays his salary is Soma Consortium, not us." Hound said. "I'm not saying this, I always feel that this reason is like a flag." What do you mean?" "Think about it, among the characters in novels or film and television dramas who say, 'I will go home and get married after this job,' how many of them survive to the end?" When you say it, it seems like this is really the case." The hound was stunned for a moment, then turned to look at Bartlett, who was chatting with Quinn without realizing it, and said, "I'm going to put this right now, guys, hurry back." "Wait a minute." Kaylan grabbed the hound. "If you drive Lao Ba back now, wouldn't you be ruining his job? Maybe the Soma Consortium will ask him for compensation for 2 new robotic arms. Woolen cloth. What should we do? Should I go and tell him now to be careful?" The hound rubbed the stubble on his chin irritably. "This is not a big deal. There is no need to talk to Lao Ba about this. People like them who make a living at sea are quite superstitious. If you tell him these things, he may not have any big reaction on the surface, but the impact on the mentality is very fatal. We don't need to kick Lao Ba out of the team, we can just let him be responsible for the logistics support task when the time comes." "This arrangement is fine." Hound nodded. "Anyway, a group of people must be allocated to handle logistics. The members of the Grey Bird Hunting Group, Tide Hunting Group and Hunting God Hunting Group all settled down in the assigned dormitories. As for 33 and his group of brothers, because the number of people was too small, they ended up with the Hunting God. The members of the hunting group were in the same building. After Kaylan and Sansan-san explained the whole story that day, the latter went to contact his companions. He called a total of 4 hunters, 3 of whom were members of the Velociraptor team, and the other one was a member of the Velociraptor team. A female military doctor. This female military doctor was not a member of the Velociraptor squad, but she had saved the lives of several Velociraptor squad members on the battlefield. After hearing that 33 and the others had switched careers to become relic hunters, she decisively chose to retire and join them. Of small groups, Kaylan noticed that the female military doctor's eyes always became very gentle when she looked at 33. Even outsiders like them could see why this girl retired, but 33I seemed to be completely oblivious and treated her the same as the other brothers. "What a piece of wood," Hound commented. "How about we give that girl a hand and help her pierce the window paper?" "Forget it, I think 33 is not unaware, he is just unwilling to accept it," Yvonne said from the side. "He gives me the feeling that he is the kind of person with a very delicate mind, and it is impossible for him to do such a thing. Can't even find it? Hey, we outsiders should not interfere with his own emotional problems, Layton interjected. It's better to think about how to get him to agree to join our hunting group, Tisk, here. Within a month, I was completely convinced by this guy. To be honest, this guy really has a lot of skills, and he deserves to be from the Velociraptor team. What's going on? Did something happen between you two? Kaylan heard the implication of Layton's words and couldn't help but glance at him and asked. At the beginning of the training camp, the big guy was unconvinced. He felt that the Mongolian guy was bragging. He felt that even an enhanced person couldn't have that kind of strength, so he went to find someone to have a fight with, like a fool hound explained. As for the ending of the fight, did you notice that the big guy's mechanical prosthetic limbs were replaced again? We all watched this battle. In the first 15 seconds, Layton's robotic arm was disabled by the opponent, and in 22 seconds he gave up, Yvonne added. Hey, I can only say that this guy is really a monster. No matter how sharp the flying knife made of nano-alloy is, it can cut my armor when thrown by hand. It's humming outrageous, Layton sighed. Old dog, don't laugh, I can only say that it's the same with you. I'm not as ignorant as some people. The hound rolled his eyes at Layton. I can cut Layton's armor with a knife, Asano Akira, who had been silent, said, causing Layton's already red face to turn into the color of liver. You are a monster too, Layton sighed heavily. Well, there are fewer and fewer normal people like me in our team. Even this guy Kaylan is probably a monster now. Can you beat me up? You make it seem like I was weak before. By the way, have you mentioned joining 33 about joining the hunting god hunting group? He refused, Kaylan asked. He didn't reject it directly. He just said he would think about it again, but I feel hesitant. Jolajitu, who had some friendship with Sanchi-san, said, but he also said that he doesn't like to be restrained very much, and prefers to be restrained. A person walks alone. P.S. Thanks to book friend 2021010118113257990 for the 50,000 starting coins. Congratulations on the birth of the 8th master of this book. Thanks to the fantasy-loving Zhengfeng and Blake for the 500 starting coins online reward. P.P.S. I went to the farm for a day, but I caught a cold and felt dizzy. The quality of the recent updates may have declined a bit. Please forgive me. Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chenmi-san. Chapter 613. Forget it, everyone has his own ambitions, and there is no need to force others. Hound said, we were not the same before. If it hadn't been for that crash, we might still be loners now. That's true. Layton touched his forehead. After all, among the few of us, only Zwilajita has experience of forming a team with him. We haven't been together for a long time, and we know everything about him completely. It's out of the question. If someone readily agrees to join the gang, we will be suspicious. That guy 33 seems to be easy to get along with, but actually it's very difficult to gain his trust. Hound shook his head. His and I have similar experiences. We have both experienced betrayal and betrayal, although from above. From a human perspective, this is called a strategic sacrifice, a price that must be paid for the sake of the overall situation, but only when you truly become the price itself, the abandoned child, can you experience it personally. Such despair. Let's not talk about it for now. Let's prepare quickly. We will set off at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, Kaylan said. The destination is the area marked as Block No. 1. I based on the quality of each transmission. Calculated based on the energy required by the unit, this Block 1 consumes the least energy, so logically speaking, it should be closest to the core power room. Stop talking about it logically. Anything related to Alpha civilization cannot be logically explained, at least not according to our logic, let alone this thing is. The Hound stopped here. As members of the Molten Mine reconnaissance team, they all knew that this ancient warship was probably not a creation of the Alpha civilization, but rather came from a third civilization whose technological level was far superior to the Alpha civilization. However, this matter is regarded as a top secret and is not allowed to be disclosed to anyone. Even the hunters who participated in the Agunakota exploration operation have no right to know. Regardless of whether Block 1 is the closest area, at least the energy we need to go back and forth is the least, and the transmission process is also the shortest. For the first exploration, we don't seek merit, but seek no faults. Our initial goal is to first find out the general condition of this ancient warship and lay the foundation for subsequent exploration operations, Kaylan said. So how much information is currently available about this Block 1? Hound asked. 0. Haven't you already obtained the authority to control the console? Isn't there even a diagram of the internal structure of the battleship? Hound said in shock. I only know the general structure of the battleship's interior, but the details of the left, right, and internal conditions of each cabin are completely unknown. In other words, this Block 1 may be empty, or it may be filled with hot magma, or it may even be filled with the corpses of alphas. Hound's question. He propped his elbows on the coffee table and tapped the glass tabletop with the nails of his index fingers. In the worst case scenario, maybe we were just teleported in and were wiped out on the spot. So, we need to send the drone in first, Kaylan said. But the signal from the drone can't be sent back, right? You can let the drone record the captured images and collected environmental data, set up an automatic cruise program, and when the time is up, I will open the transmission channel. What if the drone can't come back? Hound asked, staring closely at Kaylan. Then there is only one way. Kaylan paused and continued, under a heavy reward, there must be a brave man. Kaylan would not just tie people up and throw them in like those lunatics at the Institute, but in that case, if the exploration operation was to continue, someone would have to risk their lives to conduct a flesh investigation. Kaylan believes that as long as the reward amount is high enough, someone will voluntarily come forward. This is a gamble, and the bet is the bettor's own life, but since ancient times, there have never been a few people who exchange their lives for money, not to mention that this is not a certain death situation. He doesn't need to do anything. As long as he can come back alive after entering the transmission channel, he can get generous rewards. Even a dying, terminally ill, or even disabled old man can do this kind of thing. There are almost no barriers. To say the least, even if he fails to come back, his family will have a better life. In the old era, this kind of thing would usually be done by well-trained special dogs, but in this era, a dog's life is worth far more than a human life. Even among the powerful class on the Ark, a pure-blooded pet dog can be regarded as a rare luxury. This is ironic, but it is also an indisputable fact. The next day, morning, 9:45. All the hunters who had finished their rest gathered in the open space in front of the base. 100 meters directly in front of them was the energy supply array of the core power room. Those thick and square crystal pillars were emitting a faint green fluorescence. Everyone is wearing protective clothing. If you want to carry out large-scale teleportation, if you rely solely on energy crystals to pile up, the number of crystals required will be an astronomical number, and Kaylan can only use the power of Agunakota again. The side effect of using an energy supply array to provide energy for the transmission device is that the radiation intensity in the entire power room will increase to hundreds of times its original value. Although I've seen it in photos before, the feeling of being there is still different. It's so shocking. The ghost owl of the Grey Bird hunting group looked at the crystal pillars in the pit and exclaimed. A sigh. Of course, humans in the old era would also feel incredible if they saw a Himalaya made of 24K pure gold, Hound said. On the Ark, energy crystals can be said to be stronger currency than credits and precious metals, so the metaphor of a hunting dog is not problematic at all. All the energy crystals in other S-class ruins are not more than 1/10 of those here, right? Ghost Owl continued. I'm really curious about the origin of this battleship. The purpose of our gathering here today is for this matter, Kaylan said. We can start. Yes, Leighton, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, nodded, connected the robotic arm to the drone's controller, and at the same time typed quickly on the keyboard with his other hand. The 4 drones placed in front of him floated into the air one after another. These 4 drones were provided by the YE group. In addition to the propeller blades and emergency thrusters that most drones will be equipped with, in addition, these 4 drones are also equipped with miniature anti-gravity devices and energy shield generators. The configuration can only be described as luxury. 4 drones formed a diamond formation in the air, and the 4 energy shields were opened directly. At the same time, Kaylan also opened the transmission channel to Block 1. A group of black mist appeared directly in front of the drone Q. The transmission channel of Yagonactor is very different from the portal gates described in science fiction works. It does not have a fixed, the shape does not have an obvious boundary, and the phenomenon that can be observed with the naked eye is just an opaque black fog. After entering the range of the black mist, the person or object being transported will not disappear immediately, but will gradually become transparent like a frozen after image, and finally completely merge with the black mist. When viewed from the perspective of the person being transported, the moment they enter the black fog, the field of vision will turn into pitch black. Not only the field of vision will be dark, but other senses will also be completely disabled, and the whole person will seem to have only a wisp left. Consciousness drifts in the darkness, and everything will return to normal until it reaches the transmission destination. After debugging, the drone status is normal, and the automatic cruise program has been designed. It is set to return immediately, 600 seconds, 1200 seconds and 1800 seconds after arriving at the destination. If there is a deviation in the position of the return channel, no one will if you have the opportunity to patrol near the original coordinates. As long as the offset distance is not too outrageous, you will most likely be able to crash into it. Okay, I will keep the passage open, Kaylan responded. Come in. As soon as Kaylan finished speaking, Leighton pressed the enter key on the keyboard. The automatic cruise program was activated, and the 4 drones flew smoothly into the black fog. Based on the energy consumption required for transmission, the transmission process should only take a few seconds. If everything goes well, we will soon see the first drone returning home, Kaylan said to others. I hope so, the Hound nodded, but the expression on his face was solemn, and he stared at the black mist not far away without blinking. 30 seconds passed quickly, and there was no movement in the black fog. The thing that worried everyone still happened. The first drone failed to return in time. I knew this wouldn't go so smoothly, Hound sighed, compared to the fact that we were able to be teleported directly to the core power room at that time. We really hit the jackpot. Kaylan really wanted to tell the Hound that they were able to successfully enter the core power room, most likely because of the Prophet's intention, but there were so many people at the moment that he couldn't say this directly, so he could only acquiesce to the Hound's statement. Don't worry, maybe it's just that the exit at the other end of the transmission channel has shifted. This kind of situation has happened before, Kaylan said in a deep voice. Wait a moment. Everyone stopped talking, but the atmosphere became much more solemn invisibly. Kaylan and others waited for more than 10 minutes. When it was time for the second drone to return, the first drone still did not come back. The chance of the drone coming back is already very slim, Ghost Owl said with a frown. It's time to consider a backup plan. Actually, there are many reasons why the drone cannot come back, and it is not necessarily destroyed, Leighton said. For example, that place has extremely strong electromagnetic interference, which is strong enough to affect the inside of the aircraft through the energy shield. Navigation device. What you said is the same as what you said in vain. Hound rolled his eyes at Leighton and said, how strong is the electromagnetic interference that can penetrate even energy shields? Converted into radiation, I'm afraid even the protective clothing can't stop it. I'm just talking about one of the situations, it's not the only one, Leighton muttered. Wait 30 minutes, If no drone returns, then activate the backup plan, Kaylan said. In fact, before the drone set off, he already had a strong premonition. This sounds a bit. The less humane backup plan will definitely be used in the end. Even if the initial exploration of this block number 1 goes smoothly, there will be block no 2, block no 3, etc. So-called unexpected situations will happen sooner or later. After all, this is an S-class relic. Among the existing S-class ruins, a lot of sacrifices were made in the early exploration stage. It is not an exaggeration to say that they were made with human lives. It is simply a fantasy to explore S-class ruins without dying. I have a suggestion, Ghost Owl suddenly said. It's a meat detective anyway, whoever you send, it's all the same, right? What do you mean? 33 glanced at him and asked. Everyone who is doing this is a professional relic hunter, so we might as well speak more clearly, Ghost Owl said. Meat detection is a life-threatening job, to be honest, with no technical content. We don't need to. Precious hunters are wasted on this. My suggestion is, this candidate is selected from among the logistics staff. Even if he does not come back alive, it is not a loss to us. Although his words made people feel a little uncomfortable, Kaylan and the others really couldn't refute him. Indeed, it is indeed the most cost-effective to let less important and easily supplemented logistics personnel serve as meat detectives. Method. The selection process was very short. When Kaylan proposed that those who served as meat detectives would receive 6 million credits regardless of whether they came back alive or not, a group of people almost fought over their heads. 6 million for one life, no matter what. Whether it is on the Ark or in the wilderness, it is already considered a high price. Looking at this group of guys who signed up enthusiastically, Kaylan couldn't help but think of an old saying. The wages of avarice is death. In the end, Kaylan chose 2 people from the logistics staff photographed by Yes Consortium. Both of these men are middle-aged men in their 40s and are responsible for errands at the base. Based on their salary levels, it would take them 30 years of not eating or drinking to save 6 million credits. This is considered a monthly salary that increased to more than 10,000 and nearly 20,000 per month after taking on special tasks. If they had not been able to come to Yagunactor, their monthly income would have been only 3 to 4,000 or 600. Won is simply money that you will never make in a lifetime. The 2 selected faces were flushed with excitement at first, especially after seeing a long string of zeros starting with 6 in their accounts. The excitement reached its peak. However, it was not until the hunters put heavy protective equipment on them that the 2 of them realized that this was a mission from which they might not be able to come back, and their originally flushed faces instantly turned pale. P.S. Thanks to book friend 201901202042441646 for the 200 starting coins. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter, author, and Chenmi-san. Chapter 614. Will we die? When the hunter from the Grey Bird hunting group tightened the straps on the outside of the protective suit, the volunteer suddenly asked in a trembling voice. Not necessarily. The hunter of the Grey Bird hunting group glanced at him and said, there are many situations in which the drone cannot come back. Don't think too much about it. Just teleport it back immediately after arriving at the destination. How can it be possible? A big thing. In just a few seconds, you can get 6 million. This kind of good thing, no one else can even ask for it. The volunteer bit the tip of his tongue hard and took 2 deep breaths, trying to calm himself down. However, the amplitude and frequency of his legs swaying continued to increase. If it weren't for 2 a hunter supported him by his side, but his legs and feet might have gone weak and he sat down on the ground. Calm down. Ghost Owl glanced at the 2 of them and said with a frown, the more you fear death, the easier it is to die. If there is really something on the other side of the teleportation channel, you might be able to survive if you move quickly enough. Come back. If your legs are so weak that you can't run, then who do you think you can blame? But, I can't control it, I don't want to be like this, my body just won't obey its orders. The volunteer said with a sad face. Give them both a shot, Ghost Owl said. The injection in his mouth naturally refers to the injection of stimulants. After the hunters of the gray bird hunting group injected the contents of the syringe into the two people's bodies, their condition was obviously much more stable, but their breathing changed. Gotta be more urgent. I want to go to the toilet at this time, another volunteer said. Just put it in the protective suit. The hunter beside him patted his back. Don't worry, it won't burn your crotch. The protective suits worn by both of them were designed based on combat space suits. Even if the other end of the transmission channel is a vacuum space with a temperature of thousands of degrees Celsius, this suit can ensure that they can move for 6 months in that environment. More than 10 minutes, as for the excrement disposal device, it is the most basic configuration of this type of protective clothing. After all, there is no place in space where you can take off your pants for convenience. It's almost time. Ghost Owl glanced at the watch on his wrist, then turned to look at Kaylan. Kaylan didn't say anything, just nodded slightly. The two volunteers walked towards the black mist accompanied by 4 hunters. Rather than escorting, it would be more appropriate to say escorting. The expressions on their faces were just like those being promoted in old-era documentaries. The people on the execution ground were almost identical. Remember, your mission is to inquire about the situation in Block 1, and try your best to remember everything you see, hear, and feel. Ghost Owl said in a deep voice. The 4 hunters had let go of the 2 volunteers. The 2 looked at each other with tense faces, and then began to slowly walk towards the black mist. Old dog, do you think they can come back? Layton had put down the laptop in his hand, tilted his head, and asked the hound in a voice that only a few people around him could hear. It's hard to say. Besides, you should know more about this kind of problem than I do. The hound's eyes were always focused on the 2 volunteers. Don't you still know the performance of the 4 drones, and these 2 guys, their protective suits don't even have shield generators. But drones are dead objects, and they use preset automatic programs. Their adaptability is very poor, and they are definitely not as good as living people in complex situations, Layton argued. It seems that you still hope that these 2 people can come back alive. 33 glanced at Layton and said in a tone that could not hear any emotion at all. As a member of the exploration team, I definitely hope that they can come back alive. Layton stared at 33 with some confusion. If even these 2 people fail to come back, the exploration operation in Block 1 will. Can't we just put it on hold? From your personal point of view, do you hope that these 2 people can come back? 33 asked again. 12 million to buy 2 lives, I think this price is too high, not to mention, they still have you, won't necessarily die. Come, the hound raised his eyebrows, looking a little unkind. The one-time pension for the Velociraptor squad is 120,000 points for ordinary soldiers, double for non-commissioned officers, and 4 times for lieutenants. The families of those killed in battle can receive 15,000 points of guarantee money every year. 10 years, the total is 150,000. As soon as 33 said these words, Hound's eyes suddenly changed. The skin on his face twitched slightly, and then he muttered, at least your people can still get this money. At least 1/3 of my brothers who were killed in battle have been classified as missing, damn. Is this why you were expelled from the army? 33 asked calmly. Otherwise, the people in the field army also know that they are in the wrong, and they still dare not mention it to me. If those brothers who died had not entrusted their families to me, I would have long. Hound suddenly paused when he said this, clenched his fist and punched Layton's shoulder hard, and his tone suddenly dropped. If you scold me, why the hell did you hit me? Layton touched his shoulder armor with some distress. The hound's hand was covered with a full metal gauntlet. With just one punch, he directly hit me. The newly applied paint on the Layton robotic arm dried and chipped. Help you do some battle damage painting, Hound said angrily. However, On the other side, 33 was observing the hound's actions with great interest. After the two of them had finished arguing, he said, "So, the rumors that you almost launched a mutiny are true. Whatever rumors are true or false are all in the past, don't mention them. Nick is dead, and the relic hunter who is alive now is called Hound. Of course, if you want to get close to me, call me old dog, okay? I'm a very generous person, so I won't mind." Hound waved his hand, obviously not wanting to continue the topic. "The Colonel Nick I heard about is not someone who compromises easily," 33 continued. "I told you that Nick is dead, and now there's only Hound," Hound said impatiently. "What's more, what can you do if you don't compromise? Is it really a rebellion? They entrusted their families to them before they died in the war. Give it to me, and then I will take their family to a dead end. You became a ruin hunter to feed those people." 33's eyes changed slightly, and his originally plain but somewhat harsh tone became slightly softer. "Otherwise, I'm too lazy to think about it now, as long as I can make my own people live a better life." 33 didn't answer. He turned his head and looked in the direction of the black mist. The figures of the two volunteers have been swallowed up by the black mist. Although from the perspective of Kaylan and others, the silhouettes of their bodies can still be vaguely seen, in fact, the two have already entered the transmission channel. None of the hunters made a sound, silently staring at the two figures completely becoming transparent and disappearing. Anyone who has experienced several teleportations knows that when the figure at this end of the passage completely disappears, it means that the person or thing entering the passage has reached its destination. Many people held their breath. Among this group of hunters, the vast majority of people hoped that the two volunteers could come back safely, but the vast majority of people also believed that they might not come back at all. Meat Scout has always been a profession with a very high mortality rate during the process of exploring ruins. Let alone S-level ruins, even for A-level, B-level, and even C-level ruins, the average death rate of Meat Scout, the rate is also above 50%. In the face of the safety measures set up by Alpha civilization, human protective equipment is rarely of use, not to mention that in order to save costs, many hunting groups will not equip meat detectives with good equipment at all. In their eyes, the meat detective is just a cannon fodder used to avoid mines. "I guess it's doubtful." As soon as Layton finished speaking, another battle damage paint was added to the elbow of the robotic arm. The Hound glared at him viciously. "Shut your crow's mouth." 30 seconds have passed. Yvonne glanced at the timer and said solemnly. A total of 21 seconds passed between the two volunteers entering the black mist and their figures disappearing completely, that is to say, the time it takes to teleport from the core power room to Block 1 is 21 seconds. If the two of them had returned immediately after arriving at the other end of the passage, they would have appeared in front of everyone by this time. "They won't have died, right?" Layton muttered softly. "I told you to shut up," Hound scolded. "Do you have to put the barrel of a recoilless rifle in your mouth?" It's also possible that there was no obvious danger at the other end of the passage, so they didn't choose to return immediately. Yvonne tapped the timer panel lightly. "It's been 1 minute." At this moment, two phantoms suddenly appeared in the black mist, and gradually solidified at a speed visible to the naked eye. "They are back," someone among the hunters exclaimed. "It seems that there are no arms or legs missing." Ghost Owl folded his hands in front of his chest and said in a muffled voice. Hound and Layton, who almost had a fight just now, looked at each other and both breathed a sigh of relief. It also took the two volunteers 21 seconds to return from Block 1. As soon as they came out of the black fog, they ran quickly towards Kaylan and the others. "How's it going? What's going on over there?" The Hound walked up quickly, grabbed one of the people's shoulders, and asked hurriedly. "The passage, the exit of the passage it seems, not inside Yagonactor," the volunteer said out of breath. "The exit is not inside Yagonactor? How are you sure? Be more specific." The Hound was startled and shook the other party's shoulders vigorously. We, we seem to have been transported to the wilderness, another volunteer said. He simply sat on the ground and kept rubbing his legs that were about to cramp. Many indigenous creatures. Our landing point was more than 200 meters away from the return point, and we almost couldn't run back. What wilderness? What indigenous creatures? You should explain it clearly, Layton shouted. No rush, let them slow down first. Ghost Owl raised his hand, and 2 hunters from the Grey Bird hunting group immediately walked up and helped them disassemble the heavy equipment on their bodies. These 2 sets of equipment, the lining was almost soaked with sweat, and their limbs were twitching violently, as if they had been electrocuted. After waiting for the 2 of them to tremble and drink most of the bottle of water, Ghost Owl walked up to them and said word for word, "Retell what you saw, in chronological order, exactly as it is, and try not to know details left out." Okay, one of the 2 volunteers nodded. After we landed, we found that the location we were in was a barren plain. Barren plains, Layton was about to ask, but was glared back by the hound. Don't interrupt, let them speak for themselves. Yes, it's a plain, with land, a sky, and radiation clouds and the sun in the sky. The volunteer continued, that place should be outside Yagunactor, but the specific location is where, we don't know. After he finished speaking, he began to gasp heavily, obviously not knowing what to say anymore. Is there any iconic terrain? Ghost Owl asked. No, it's an endless plain, but about 1 kilometer away from the teleportation destination, a large number of indigenous creatures gathered. They seemed to be eating, but we didn't see them clearly biting. What kind of meat is it? Fortunately, they didn't notice us, so we hurriedly ran into the black mist. Can you identify the species of these indigenous creatures? Yvonne spoke this time. Both volunteers shook their heads and said, we have never seen this kind of indigenous creature, but it looks a bit like a wolf on Earth. Wolf? Yvonne was stunned for a moment and said to himself, there are at least 20 kinds of indigenous creatures on Alpha Planet that are similar in appearance and size to wolves. You two wait a moment. As Yvonne said, he took out his tablet and found a dozen pictures of wolf-like creatures. Is it one of these pictures? The 2 of them still shook their heads. Then have you paid attention to the sky? And the sun? Is there anything unusual about the sky and the sun? Ghost Owl then asked. I didn't pay much attention, but it should be exactly the same as the sky in the wilderness, a volunteer said. Where are the drones? Have you found the drones sent out before? Layton asked. No. Mr. Kaylan, what's going on? Ghost Owl turned his head and looked at Kaylan. Judging from the descriptions of these 2 people, they were indeed teleported to the outside of Agunakotaur, in some unknown corner of the wilderness. But judging from the feedback information from the console, the transmission destination has not changed. Kaylan shook his head. It is within this battleship. Moreover, if it is to be transmitted to the outside of the battleship, the energy consumed cannot be that high. Phew. Then how do they explain what they saw? Is it possible? Kaylan pondered for half a second and said, is there a cave inside the battleship? P.S. Thanks to Chingtianwu for the reward of 1,666 book coins. Thank you to Bayueling for the reward of 100 starting coins. By the way, this writer's backend is a bit weird. Sometimes you can see the rewards from QQ Reading, but sometimes there is no news at all. But having said that, readers from QQ Reading or other channels should try not to reward you. You reward them, only a very small part of the money gets to the author, and most of it is taken away by the platforms and channels. If you really want to support the author, you can come to Kidian.com's app. Ankan is extremely grateful. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi-san. Chapter 615. There is another possibility, which often appears in ruins. The things they saw may be just hallucinations, Yvonne added. Whether it's a hallucination or not, just look at what's captured by the camera equipment they carry. People can hallucinate, but machines can't, Layton said. The camera equipment carried by the two volunteers has been removed from the protective clothing by the hunter, and the memory card inside has been inserted into the projector. Soon, an endless plain appeared in front of everyone. It was almost the same as what the two volunteers described. This kind of landform can be seen everywhere in the wilderness. If it has any characteristics, it is probably yellow. Sandy soil is more common in the northern hemisphere of Alpha Planet and less common in the southern hemisphere. In the distance of the camera, a group of creatures that looked like wolves but were not wolves gathered in twos and threes. They were tearing at several bloody corpses, and the bones hanging with pieces of meat and fascia were dragged all over the ground. It is indeed a brand new indigenous creature. Ivan nodded, but it cannot be ruled out that it is a variant of a known species. After all, there is no genetic sample, everything is just speculation. Wait a minute, pause. Kaylan suddenly raised his hand and pointed at a chewed-up corpse in the picture. Zoom in the picture here. Thanks to the fact that the camera equipment carried by the two volunteers are high-end goods worth hundreds of thousands, even if the picture is enlarged more than 10 times, the picture quality is still very clear, and even the fine hairs on the meat are visible. Distinguish. Look at these hairs, the color is dark gray, and the texture and length are exactly the same as those on these creatures, Kaylan said. You want to say that these guys are cannibalizing themselves, Ghost Owl said with a frown. I just used a computer to analyze the skeleton structures of these corpses and skeletons and these creatures, and I can basically confirm that the eaters and the food are the same creature, Ivan said. Isn't this too strange? Tiger poison doesn't eat seeds after all, the hunting dog murmured. Examples of cannibalism are not uncommon in nature, but most of them occur in insect creatures. As for higher level creatures like mammals, there are generally only two situations of cannibalism, Ivan said. In terms of biological knowledge, he is probably the most knowledgeable among this group of hunters. Which two? The hound asked immediately. One is that when the cubs are born, the mother will eat the cubs with congenital defects or diseases. This prevents the disease from being transmitted to other cubs and allows other cubs to receive more milk and food. The female animal that has become weak due to childbirth can also use this to supplement part of its nutrition. What about the other scenario? Shortage of food. The plane at the other end of the teleportation channel does look very barren. If the exit of the teleportation channel has not shifted, and this place is inside the Yagunactor, then I think all this makes sense. First Mate Caroline, who had just transferred to become a ruin hunter, said nervously, these wolf-like creatures are trapped in this world. They have no, if you cannot leave this wilderness to hunt, you will naturally have to eat your own kind. With all due respect, this inference is completely untenable. Ghost Owl glanced at Caroline and retorted coldly. The latter's face immediately turned red. Is there something wrong? To say that it is completely untenable, this is not true. Isn't it a bit too absolute? Think about it. How long has Yagunactor been soaked in the magma pool in the molten mine area? Ghost Owl paused and continued, we won't mention the previous tens of thousands of years. Let's start from the moment humans landed on Alpha Planet. If you lock a group of carnivores in a closed area with poor food, 50 years later, how many do you think the number of these creatures will be left? It doesn't even take 50 years, it only takes 5 weeks, and this ethnic group will be completely destroyed, Ivan said calmly. It can't be such a coincidence. At this time, the food in this area was exhausted, so we saw a scene of cannibalism, right? Ghost Owl continued. As soon as he finished speaking, Ivan continued, any ecological zone that wants to last for more than 10 years must have one or more complete and stable circulation chains, even if it is a biological laboratory that simulates the real environment. Eco-tanks, it's also difficult to do this without human intervention. Okay, you two are singing along, you have to make this little girl cry, right? Hound glanced at Caroline, whose face was constantly changing between green and white, and quickly smoothed things over. Actually, What First Officer Caroline said makes sense. Kaylan said, when the ecological balance is broken by external forces, it is a disaster for the creatures in this ecosystem, although I am not sure about the balance. How was it destroyed? But when it comes to external force, this ancient battleship was accidentally activated again by me not long ago. Does it count? Yes, of course. Yvonne nodded. Because of this accident, you have already wiped out a biological group. He pointed at the large pit filled with crystal pillars in the distance and continued, those mutated lavacanthaphias have survived in the power chamber for at least hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years, and have reproduced a large number of offspring, but only because the energy supply array was activated, they were all crushed into powder. Similarly, this block number 1 may also be affected by the activation of the battleship, causing these creatures to lose the food source they originally relied on for survival, and are forced to kill their own kind and cannibalize their corpses. Kaylan pondered. For the aboriginals inside Yagunactor, the departure of this ancient warship from the lava pool may be completely equated with a drastic change such as the sun goes out. Anyway, let's just go over and see if it's okay. Layton said, there's no point in talking about it. Thanks to your good luck, if other hunters were as reckless as you, they would have died in the ruins before they met us. Hound complained. How can I be called reckless? I am called a practical person. Isn't there a saying that seeing is better than hearing 100 times? We will find out if that ghost place is inside the battleship. We can go and take a look, anyway, anytime. It can all be teleported back, Layton said. That's true. Hound turned his head and looked at Kaylan. What do you say? Let's go there. Well, since it has been confirmed that there are aggressive creatures in Block 1, we must be prepared to fight them as soon as we land, Kaylan said. The previous 2 volunteers may have not attracted the attention of those wolf-like creatures because their targets were too small, but if the large army of ruin hunters here teleports over, they will most likely alert these eating guys, and the battle will be over. Unavoidable. Although from the size point of view, the combat effectiveness of these wolf-like creatures should not be much strong, after all, they are a group of unknown creatures that have survived in S-class ruins for who knows how many years. It is always good to be more cautious. I'll take the lead, Valentina volunteered. A silver-white humanoid mecha with a streamlined and beautiful outer armor stood at the front of the team. This machine is not the one modified with the Valkyrie Zero frame that Valentina has been driving before, but a new machine that the YA Consortium sent to the Zero fleet just a week ago. According to Yayan, this machine does not have a conventional number or serial number, but only one name, Augustus. Just like the unprecedented founding emperor of the Roman Empire, this machine with the same name is the only one in the world. It was specially developed by the YIP Consortium's Agunakota exploration operation. This machine body was designed without considering manufacturing costs and mass production issues. All indicators were pushed to the top, so much so that its skeleton mold was completely disposable. After removing the machine body and spare replacement parts, they were directly sealed up. It's not that the YES Consortium doesn't want to use the set of molds to produce a castrated mass-produced machine. You know, no matter how powerful the castration is, at least it has the gimmick of the prototype, and the sales volume of the mass-produced machine will not be any worse. In fact, it's not that they don't want to, but that they simply can't do mass production. The design specifications of this machine body are not on the same level as other prototypes. The internal mechanical skeleton alone is forged from 100% pure nano alloy. The diameter of the skeleton of the main part is only 16 mm. Other materials, not to mention supporting the heavy outer armor and internal facilities, may not even be able to bear the weight of the skeleton. Kaylan still remembers the painful expression on Yayan's face during the video communication. Although the other party did not disclose the specific cost of Augustus to Kaylan, thinking about it, he knew it must be an astronomical figure. In comparison, the material support provided by the Soma Consortium seems relatively shabby. Although the total value must have exceeded 100 million, most of them are things that can be bought on the market. Okay, Valentina's Augustus will take the vanguard position, and the rest of us will follow. However, if those wolf-like creatures are not strong, try to keep as many alive as possible, whether it is to take them back and sell them, whether it is given to various research institutions or as rare collections in rich people's homes. I think they should be able to sell for a good price, Kaylan said. They relic hunters are not an army. To put it bluntly, the word profit is the real driving force. Judging from this video, these unknown creatures are probably the only valuable things in Block 1. What you said makes us feel like real hunters, Hound teased. Whether it's a dead thing or a living thing, as long as it's valuable, it's our target, Ghost Owl nodded calmly. No one has trouble with money. Counting Kaylan and the others, the four groups totaled nearly 100 people. Naturally, it was impossible for all of these more than 100 people to be included in the advance team. Only those with the strongest strength and the most experience, only a hunter, can take on this important task. The hunting god hunting group sent out 4 people: Valentina, Kaylan, Asano, Akira, and Ivan. The 5 of them, 33, sent out their entire army. As for the Greybird hunting group, they sent out a team of 10 people. The elite team is led by Ghost Owl himself. On the contrary, no one from the Tide hunting group was included in the advance team. The risks and uncertainties of the initial exploration are very high. It is undoubtedly very risky to bring a group of newcomers who have never visited the ruins at this time. Even if Kaylan and the others decide to use S-level ruins to train their troops, at least they have to wait until they have established a firm footing. Let's talk about it after you get your heels down. Check your equipment one last time, especially the weapons, Ghost Owl said to the hunter behind him. Kaylan noticed that the hunters of the Greybird hunting group all held 2 guns in their hands, one of which had a distinctive shape at first glance. Known to be non-lethal firearms used to fire tranquilizer rounds. The preparations are really complete. Layton couldn't help but sigh in a low voice. It is rare to use tranquilizer guns when exploring ruins, but he didn't expect that the Greybird hunting group could actually have 10 people with one. We couldn't have expected this to happen in advance. Let's go, Kaylan ordered. Valentina took the lead in driving Augustus into the black fog, and the others immediately followed. From the perspective of others, 21 seconds can be said to be very short, but as the person being transported, he cannot feel the passage of time during the transmission process. Kaylan feels that his consciousness is like a darkness. After drifting for decades, a ball of light suddenly appeared in front of his eyes. The next second, control of his body returned to him again. The first moment he landed, he opened the energy shield and assumed a defensive posture. Not far away, the silver-white Augustus was confronting dozens of wolf-like creatures. They did not directly attack the mecha, so Valentina did not choose to take the lead, but had already taken action on her own. The force restrained the entire herd and bought enough time for those behind to adjust. The radiation in this place is so high, Ivan's voice came from behind. He was the third one to arrive at Block 1 after Kaylan, but he did not immediately pay attention to those creatures, but turned on the environmental monitoring equipment. The radiation in this place is more than 15 times that of the power room. Although it does not pose a threat to us, these creatures live in such a high radiation environment and can still look so normal. From a certain point of view, it's rare to say that, Ivan commented. Not only the radiation, the magnetic field is also completely disordered. Valentina's voice came from the earphones. This can explain why the previous drone did not return. P.S. Thanks to the 10,000 starting coin reward from Wei Yisheng and Wei, congratulations on the birth of the 37th helmsman of this book. Thank you to book friend 202202102017124662 for the 500 starting coin reward. Thank you to STDC for the 100 starting coin reward. PPS The cold has gotten worse again. I feel groggy all over. I feel a little incredible that I can barely code it out. Anyway, I can't guarantee the updates in the past few days. I may ask for leave at any time, please forgive me. Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chenmi-san. Chapter 616. My connection with the battleship's console has not been cut off. I can already feel the presence of the console and issue instructions to it through my consciousness. In other words, where we are now is indeed in the Yagonak Thor's interior, K-Lan said. Those who work in this industry should be used to it a long time ago, right? 33's voice rang out. Several of them arrived at Block 1 almost immediately behind Ivan and Akira Asano. As members of the former elite force, this group of people showed strong tactical literacy as soon as they landed. More than 4.5 UN. The tall mobile shield was set up in the blink of an eye. Coupled with 2 general-purpose machine guns and a minefield in front of the shield made of rapidly deployed anti-infantry mines, a standard defensive fortress appeared in front of K-Ian's eyes. It's still too slow, 33 said with some self-blame. According to the previous requirements in the army, the time to set up the shield and assemble the machine gun cannot exceed 15 seconds, which is almost 20 seconds. It seems that we are comfortable. It's been too long. This speed is already very fast, K-Lan said. But those beasts are faster, 33 shook his head. On the battlefield, as long as the speed of erecting the shield barrier is slower for 1 second, the defense line will be broken through several more times. You know how to be killed by those things if we enter the defense line. How many casualties will we incur? Once, we jointly operated with a second-line force to intercept a migrating group of Earth dragons in an open valley. As a result, they were 2 seconds slow in setting up a defense line, and the ground dragons at the front were slowed down by 2 seconds. Xin Long rushed into the position without any hindrance. Another retired soldier from the Velociraptor team said. He kept shaking his head as he spoke, his eyes full of unbearability. Then what? K-Lan couldn't help but ask. Although the other party said they are second-line troops, the second-line troops of the Field Corps can be regarded as real elites in other places. Their combat effectiveness is definitely not much weaker. At most, the personnel and equipment configuration are like that of the Velociraptor squad. The small group of Special Operations troops is only half a chip away. There were 357 people in that infantry battalion. In the end, only 19 people returned alive, and not one of the 19 people's bodies was intact. 33 took over. But this can only mean that the battle process is more difficult. If only a few Earth dragons break in, concentrate your firepower to quickly eliminate them, and then. Before K-Lan finished speaking, he was interrupted by 33. Everyone can talk about war on paper, but the battlefield in reality is different from real-time strategy games. After a hole is opened in the defense line, the enemy behind has already. They are pouring in continuously, and this hole will only get bigger and bigger, and it won't be long before even that part of the established defense line will collapse. There was no fighting process at all in that battle. From the moment the defense line was breached, there was only a rout. The veteran who spoke earlier said, otherwise we could barely maintain our formation when we retreated. Use firepower to suppress the beasts that rush up, and even those 19 people probably won't survive. Are there no mechas or tanks? What about air support? K-Lan asked. Heavy equipment, air, and artillery support are not always available. On such a rapidly changing battlefield, even if the command headquarters issues an emergency order, it will take time for the order to be conveyed and implemented. As a soldier, what you can rely on is the gun in your hand and the teammates around you, 33 said. K-Lan originally wanted to ask about the details of the battle, but Valentina's voice suddenly rang through the communication channel. They are starting to approach me. K-Lan and 33 looked up at the same time and saw the group of wolf-like creatures forming a semicircle of about 180 degrees, surrounding Augustus inside. Several of them were relatively tall. The tall wolf-like creature was tentatively approaching the machine. Try to use force to scare them, K-Lan replied. Okay. As soon as Valentina finished speaking, Augustus raised his left leg high and stepped on it hard. Bang! With Augustus as the center, a large amount of smoke and dust instantly rose up. Even Kalan and the others, who were standing dozens of meters away, could feel a strong earthquake coming from the ground beneath their feet. Although Kalan and the others' vision was obscured by smoke and dust, Valentina immediately shared the monitor screen of Augustus to the communication channel. Through the screen, those wolf creatures could be seen. He just took 2 steps back at first, but then used the cover of smoke and dust to rush directly towards Augustus. Not only did it not act as a deterrent, it actually inspired the ferocious nature of these creatures, Ivan said. Permission to counterattack, no need to hold back, Kalan immediately ordered. The shared perspective instantly moved, and a flash of silver light was seen. Augustus had rushed out of the range of the smoke, and on the outside of its arms, there were 2 more crescent-shaped blades, a series of splashes of blood. Chasing behind the pair of blades, the blades themselves were not stained with any blood. Augustus took a dozen steps back before stopping, and then assumed a defensive counterattack posture in the direction of Yanshin. However, those wolf-like creatures did not chase them out of the smoke. It wasn't until the smoke cleared after a few seconds that everyone could clearly see what had happened. The bodies of 3 wolf-like creatures had been chopped off at the waist. These 3 happened to be the largest alpha wolves that had tried to approach Augustus earlier. And other wolf-like creatures fell on the body of the alpha wolf, tearing and biting the flesh and blood of the alpha wolf. It is clear that there is a formidable enemy, but the first reaction of these beasts is not to continue the pursuit, but to devour the bodies of their slain companions. This. A former member of the Velociraptor team said with a look of astonishment. It means these beasts are really hungry. 33 nodded. For them, eating is a priority over defending against foreign enemies. The carcasses they were eating before have been eaten up. If we hadn't come over, they would probably have started a new round of killing each other, Ivan said. Although the 3 alpha wolves were strong, they could not withstand the feeding of dozens of hungry wolves. In less than 2 minutes, their corpses had all been chewed up, leaving only the torn pieces. A torn skeleton and broken fur stained with blood. After eating this fast food, those wolf-like creatures finally focused their attention on Augustus and the group of ruin hunters behind the mecha. Let my people deal with them, Ghost Owl said. A living beast is worth more than a dead one. 10 hunters from the Grey Bird hunting group lined up, raised their tranquilizer guns, and pointed their guns at the wolves in the distance. Put. Ghost Owl gave an order, and 10 tranquilizer guns fired at the same time. This posture was somewhat similar to the Q-to-kill tactic when gunpowder guns first entered the army in the 17th century, but compared with the deafening gunfire and choking gunpowder guns. The muzzle smoke and the movement produced when the tranquilizer gun is fired are so small that they are almost negligible. Not only the movement during shooting, but also the shooting effect, seems to be negligible. Not a single wolf-like creature fell down, as if these tranquilizer guns had been fired into the air. The distance between the 2 sides is only 100 meters. Each of these tranquilizer guns is a high-end hunting tool produced by a top firearms company. Coupled with high-precision optical sights, it is impossible to miss the target. But if a stone is thrown into the water, it will still make a splash, but when these anesthetic guns hit those wolf-like creatures, they didn't even react at all. Is it possible that the amount of medicine is too small? Ivan looked at Ghost Owl and asked. The ammunition used is reinforced ammunition, with a dose of 16 standard units, Ghost Owl said expressionlessly. Anesthetic bombs, like active ammunition, also have standard dosage units. Generally speaking, a standard unit of dosage is enough to inject a strong adult man within 3 seconds without any strengthening or modification surgery. 3 or 4 units are enough to place a bull. 16 units can be considered a lethal dose if used on humans. Load the ammunition and prepare for the second round. There was another salvo, followed by the third and fourth rounds. The reason why there was no fifth round was not because the ammunition was exhausted, but because those wolf-like creatures had already rushed in front of Augustus and were getting close to the mecha. A fight broke out. But before that, not even a single wolf-like creature was knocked down by a tranquilizer bomb. The resistance of these organisms is not generally high, Ivan said while taking notes on the device he carried. Change to a live ammunition gun, Ghost Owl said, his tone still maintaining a calm tone. For him, this kind of thing is not even an accident. Not all the wolf-like creatures targeted Augustus. Almost half of them bypassed the tall mecha and rushed towards Kaylan and the others. First shoot with a small caliber firearm to test the defense of these creatures, Kaylan said. The live ammunition guns equipped by the hunters of the Grey Bird hunting group are all modifications of the ARC series carbines, and the calibers are all 10 mm. The bullets fired by this thing are enough to cut a person in half, but when used on alpha indigenous creatures on his body, it can indeed only be regarded as a small caliber firearm. 3 bursts of short bursts, targeting the leg joints first, Ghost Owl said. Boom. 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 The sound of gunshots suddenly rang out, but at this moment, an unexpected scene happened, the wolf-like creatures rushing at the front, on their bodies, a faint light curtain actually appeared. When the bullets fired by the hunters of the Grey Bird hunting group touched these light curtains, they instantly turned into tiny sparks and splashed away, completely unable to harm the creatures behind the light curtains. Is this an energy shield? Even Ghost Owl, who had seen strange events, couldn't help but frown at this time. How can an energy shield appear on a living body? Although the light curtain on these wolf-like creatures is much dimmer than the energy shield created by the shield generator, judging from the collision effect of the bullet, this is definitely a genuine energy shield. The fine and bright sparks are actually metal droplets produced after the bullet is melted by high temperature. What else can this defense mechanism be but an energy shield? Energy shields don't necessarily appear on living things. Speaking of the energy shields of living things, Kaylan immediately thought of the resurrected ancient behemoth Leviathan. The reason why Vitan can release an energy shield is because those bloody worms simulate the structure of a shield generator in its body, and these wolf-like creatures in front of them obviously cannot have such an ability. If they had a shield generator in their bodies, when Augustus cut the 3 wolves in half just now, their corpses would have exploded directly instead of becoming food for the same kind of people. It's different from that time. Ivan shook his head repeatedly. Obviously he knew that the creature with an energy shield that Kaylan was referring to was the Leviathan beast. This is a completely different beast. Mechanism. His eyes gradually heated up. For any biology enthusiast, this is a pioneering discovery. Ivan knows better than anyone present that the energy shield appears in the body of living organisms. Body, what does this mean? We must capture living samples, Ivan shouted. I can't find the right words to describe their research value for a while, but as long as you know, the mysteries contained in these creatures are probably no less than those of a wild animal kind. Is this too exaggerated? Can these guys compare with prehistoric species? 33 pinched his nose and asked. Unexpectedly, he had already clamped several flying knives made of nino alloy between his fingers. If Ivan hadn't spoken, he would have thrown the flying knife away at this time. The wolf-like creature had already rushed into the minefield, and the anti-infantry mines were activated one after another. Hundreds of metal balls the size of broad beans spun at high speed and jumped up from the ground, then exploded one after another, ejecting even smaller steel balls inside. The hunters noticed that only some of the steel balls were intercepted by the energy shield on the wolf-like creatures, and some of them were actually shot onto their bodies, but the small steel balls did not hurt these skins. The only effect of the rough and thick beasts is probably to slightly slow down their charging speed. They seem to be unable to control the energy shield. Is it an adaptive triggering mechanism? Or is it a stress response of the organism? No, it may be more complicated than I thought. Could it be at the cellular level? Ivan is still brainstorming on his side, while on the other side, the two machine guns behind the shield have begun to roar. PS Thanks to book friend 202202210201712462 for the 500 starting coins. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter, author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 618. Although the caliber of the 8.65mm He bullet used by the MG-010S Reaper General machine gun is slightly smaller than the 10mm full-power bullet of the assault rifle, and the penetration and stopping effect are slightly weaker, but the bullets used are usually filled with lead cores or steel cores, while AP bullets use tungsten cores, but for this kind of He bullets, the warheads are filled with micro-detonators and high explosives. Anti-bargaining tips: the penetrating power and stopping effect of the warhead have nothing to do. There is no saying that the stopping effect is weak if the penetrating power is strong. The two attributes do not conflict. In addition, AP and He are armor piercing and high definition respectively, abbreviation for explosive bomb. When a solid warhead hits the energy shield, it will only be melted by the energy shield into molten metal, and then pushed out by the rapidly expanding air under high temperature. However, high explosive bombs are different. Each round will explode firmly on the ground. On top of the shield, the light curtain quickly dimmed to the point where it was almost invisible. There are currently only two effective ways to deal with energy shields. One is to use a physical weapon with a large enough mass that cannot be completely ablated by the shield in a short time to penetrate the shield and directly attack the target behind the shield. Attack. Another method is to use energy shields or explosions to reduce the strength of the shield until the entire shield is exhausted. A flurry of high explosive bombs directly blew away the shields of these wolf-like creatures, followed by their fur, flesh, and bones. When the last wolf-like creature fell, the barrels of the two machine guns had become red and translucent. It seems that the task of catching people alive can only be left to Valentina. Kaylan glanced at the broken corpses on the ground and shrugged helplessly at Yvonne. Looking at another battlefield, the situation was almost one-sided. Augustus did not even use those thermal weapons with terrifying firepower. He almost killed ordinary wolf-like creatures by relying only on the double blades on his armor. Don't kill them all. Try to catch a few alive, Kaylan said to Valentina on the communication channel. Okay. After saying the good word, Augustus put away his double blades, made fists with both hands and started fighting with these wolf-like creatures. The claws of these beasts were very sharp, but they were not as strong as the nano-alloy armor. Compared to this, they are still a few notches behind. Their only result was probably scratching Augustus's beautiful silver paint. But every chipped paint and scratch was obtained by using some part of their limbs or even their own lives. If they didn't adopt the fighting with wounds method, these wolf-like creatures wouldn't even be able to touch them. To Augustus. I saw a wolf-like creature leaping up from the ground, trying to pounce on Augustus' back, but Augustus turned around, grabbed it with a mechanical hand in the air, and slammed it to the ground. Even though they were dozens of meters away, Kaylan still seemed to hear the crisp sound of countless bones being broken in the wolf-like creature. The flexibility of this mecha formed a very obvious contrast with its huge body. With the anti-gravity device and high-pressure jet air cushion installed on its feet, it is like a ballet dancer gliding on the ice, constantly walking through the gaps in the battlefield. Every time it takes a shot, it can instantly severely damage a wolf-like creature. Biology. In less than 5 minutes in total, no one of the wolf-like creatures watching Augustus was still standing. The total number of targets was 31, 19 were killed, 4 were severely injured and nearly dead, and 8 were incapacitated, Valentina reported on the communication channel. Well done. In addition, I also discovered something, Valentina said again. What? Their teeth, although they cannot penetrate the body's armor, they can tear through the energy shield. Valentina described an astonishing and shocking news in a very calm tone. If it were placed a few hours ago, this news would have been, it is indeed very shocking, but now, After everyone has discovered that these wolf-like creatures can use their bodies to release energy shields, the fact that their teeth can break the shield can only be said to be strange. After all, if they don't have the means to break the energy shield, how can they kill their own kind? The teleportation point has been cleared. 33. You and the Greybird hunting group each selected 4 people to stay in this area. Valentina and Augustus also stayed, and the others took the captured wolf-like creatures. Return to the supply base with the body, Kaylan ordered. This is the correct way to explore ruins. Proceed slowly and step by step. Only in this way can risks and casualties during exploration be controlled to a minimum. After Kaylan and others returned to the supply base at the other end of the transmission channel with their trophies, the entire base immediately became busy. First of all, the corpses of these wolf-like creatures must be sealed immediately to prevent them from rotting, and injured and captured individuals must be treated immediately. Yvonne is responsible for this part of the affairs, so much so that Leighton couldn't help but complain. Laumazy has been a doctor for half his life, but now he is working as a veterinarian. Research on wolf-like creatures must be put on pace immediately, but there are only the most basic anatomy equipment in the supply base. It would be a waste of resources if experiments were conducted here. Even Yvonne, who was impatient, could only pick up a few badly damaged pieces of wreckage to satisfy his craving. As for the captured living samples, they still had to be returned to the Ark intact. On the other side, Kaylan asked Yayan to select a group of people from the logistics staff and divide them into 2 groups, the engineering team and the survey team, to go to Block 1 for the construction of the outpost and further geological research. Environmental survey. In addition, he also placed a new order for the consortium. The exploration team urgently needs a drone that is lightweight, uninterrupted by magnetic fields, and can reach a flying height of at least 10,000 meters, although Kaylan has determined that block number 1 should be a cabin inside Yagonactor, but the roof that was supposed to be a solid cabin has turned into a sky dome that seems to have almost no height limit, and there is a star in the sky. The sun that emits light and heat is more puzzling. In order to find out whether the sky and the sun in the sky really exist or are simulated by some device, an aircraft must be used to conduct vertical exploration. If necessary, Kaylan even plans to let manned aircraft to accomplish this mission. Not only air exploration, but ground exploration must also follow up. If Block 1 is a cabin inside Yagonactor, then this cabin must have boundaries. Just like the various blocks on the Ark, even if the area of the individual blocks is so large that it takes several hours to drive across it, as long as you keep walking in one direction, you will eventually be blocked by a wall, no matter what is this wall, a fence for a certain block, or a dividing wall between blocks, or a safety wall between the residential area and the outer structure of the Ark. As long as it is a closed structure, the wall must exist. I need an armed convoy, Kaylan said to Yayan on the other end of the video call. I'm afraid it won't take a few days to reach the border of Block 1 with human feet. We have to use high-speed, only mobile vehicles will do. It makes sense, Yayan nodded, the fat on his chin trembling. These vehicles must be light and highly maneuverable, and also have certain firepower and defense capabilities. Although from previous battles, judging from the picture, those wolf-like creatures are not very powerful, but it cannot be ruled out that there may be something else in Block 1. This requirement should be very simple for the consortium, right? It should be a matter of minutes to even take out an airframe like the Augustus and modify a few off-road vehicles, Kaylan said. Of course, let alone our family, there are a lot of off-road vehicles on the market that meet this requirement. However, since Brother Kaylan has entrusted this matter to us, then we will naturally come up with the best products. Yayan rolled his eyes and continued, a new off-road vehicle with performance that surpasses most similar competing products on the market, and it bears the name of S-Class Ruins Yagonactor Exploration Pioneer. No, I think it will sell well after mass production. Our family has been immersed in the military industry for decades, and it is time to enter the civilian vehicle market. It has to be said that although this little fat guy has no talent in mecha research and development, his business acumen is not bad at all. Lan K only made one request, and he immediately thought of mass production and marketization, and then came up with the idea of mass production and marketization. The idea of taking this opportunity to open up the civilian market, this guy is really good at doing business. After all, most of the focus of ARC is now on the Yagunactor. At this time, a new vehicle is launched and put into exploration. This vehicle is estimated to be available before it is officially mass-produced. With a lot of exposure and traffic, coupled with secret hype and promotion, after the official launch, the sales data will not be ugly. At present, the vehicle manufacturer with the largest market share on ARC is General Motors, which has been inherited from the old era. The Junior series of off-road vehicles that currently rank first on ARC is his company. The product. Relying on close cooperation with the military, General Motors successfully acquired Volkswagen and Daimler Group in the old era and became a veritable leader in the automobile industry. Divide the world. However, in the new era, only two independent companies of Japanese cars, Toyota, owned by the Mitsui Consortium, and Mitsubishi, owned by the Mitsubishi Consortium, are left. As for the Fuji Consortium and its Nissan, they have disappeared in the long river of history. As for Huaxia Automobile, which had developed to the point where it could almost compete with General Motors, it switched to researching more important aerospace vehicles and space battleships, and took the initiative to cede the automobile and later hovercraft markets to others. Yayan's move is quite ambitious to revive the glory of China's automobile industry. Just as Lan and Yayan were discussing the configuration requirements of the fleet and the replenishment of other supplies, a hunter from the Tide hunting group suddenly ran over in a hurry and said to Lan, "Mr. Lan. Dr. Ivan asked you to go over there immediately. He said he made an important discovery." Important discovery? Lan was stunned for a moment, and after briefly explaining to Yayan, he turned off the video communication, got up and walked towards the base laboratory. There is indeed a biology laboratory in the frontline supply base, but this laboratory is as crude as a biology classroom used for students to do some simple experiments in the business and academic stage. It does not have advanced research equipment at all. After being transported to Yagunactor, there was only one dissecting table and two optical microscopes in the entire laboratory. What can you find with this little thing? With this idea in mind, Lan opened the door to the laboratory. Ivan was sitting behind a table at the moment, staring at the eyepiece of the microscope attentively, gently turning the focusing knob with one hand, and carefully adjusting the position of the slide with tweezers with the other. Any important discoveries? Lan pulled up a chair, sat down opposite Ivan, and said straight to the point. "You will know after you come and see for yourself." Ivan raised his head and said to Lan, "Although it is impossible to see more microscopic details due to the limitations of the equipment, this alone is enough to be included in the next issue of Authority. It's on the cover of Biology magazine." "What, are you calling it so mysterious?" Lan had to stand up again before his butt got hot, walked around the table, walked to the microscope, and put his eyes up. There is a tissue section on the slide that is about the size of a little fingernail. The thickness of the section is as thin as a cicada. The reflector on the microscope base can illuminate the entire tissue clearly. Although Lan did not have high attainments in biology or anatomy, he still discovered the problem at the first sight. That thing outside, could it be the cell wall? Lan raised his head in astonishment and met Ivan's complicated eyes. "Theoretically, yes," Ivan nodded, "but I'm not even sure whether this thing is the same thing as the cell wall we know." "But don't animal cells have cell walls?" Lan wondered. "Are these creatures that look so similar to wolves actually plants, or fungi?" He instantly remembered the mimetic fungi they had encountered in the wilderness. Could it be said that these wolf-like creatures were actually a combination of fungi? That's not right. If they are combined, they are not so easy to kill. After being hit by a bullet, they should disintegrate directly. P.S. Thanks to King Butcher for the 200 starting coins, thanks to 17 and H. Han Baobao on the tree for the 100 starting coins. Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chenmi San. Chapter 619. I have currently taken cells from more than a dozen places such as hair, epithelial tissue, muscle tissue, etc. for examination. Except for blood cells and body fluids, all other cells have a structure similar to the cell wall. The material components of this layer of structure are not yet it's clear, but if it's made of cellulose. If they were made of cellulose, it would be impossible for these creatures to show the ability to move like animals. Kaylan went on to say that the cell wall, if magnified, looks a bit like an insect's exoskeleton. But if every part of a bug's body was made of a hard exoskeleton, it would be impossible for the bug to move. In addition, there is another discovery. During my dissection, this cell wall-like structure released a large amount of radiation. I even have reason to suspect that this wolf-like creature generates energy shields. The source comes from here. Wait a minute, you just said that except for blood cells, all cells have a cell wall structure. What about nerve cells? Nerve cells don't have a similar structure, right? Kaylan asked. I did not find nerve cells in the tissues of these creatures. Yvonne looked at Kaylan and said seriously, now you can understand why I was so anxious to call you over. There are no nerve cells. What about the brain? Are there any whole body scans of complete corpses or living samples? Scanned, but because there are a lot of radiation sources in these wolf-like creatures, the scanned images are all snowflakes and nothing can be seen. Yvonne shook his head. Wait a minute, I'll make a call. Kaylan was startled for a moment, then reacted immediately, took out his cell phone and dialed a number. Is it the escort team? Yes, I am Kaylan. Immediately pick out the remains of a complete head from the specimens. No, directly send a complete corpse to the biological laboratory of the base. Now, immediately, immediately. Soon, an almost intact body of a wolf-like creature was pushed in on a cart. This wolf-like creature was killed in the battle with Augustus. Its spine was broken into 4 parts. There were multiple fractures and muscle lacerations all over its body. There were a large number of bones under the skin that could be touched by hand. The hard object, it was a lump formed after internal bleeding coagulated. This wolf-like creature was probably beaten to death by Augustus. Fortunately, her head was not seriously damaged, and the shape of her skull remained intact, which basically met Kaylan and Ivan's experimental needs. Prepare for craniotomy. Kaylan glanced at Yvonne, picked up a pair of medical gloves and put them on. I'll do it for you. Yes, Yvonne nodded and took a metal tray from the sterilization cabinet under the table, which was filled with newly sterilized surgical knives and a medical chainsaw about the same size as an electric razor. The shape of this medical electric saw is very similar to the electric drill often used in construction, so some people call it a saw drill. Of course, as long as the working head is changed, this thing can also be used as an electric drill. Work. Prepare the skin first, Yvonne said. Even though he was facing a corpse, all the required procedures were still indispensable. He covered the head of the wolf-like creature's corpse with a piece of non-woven cloth, used a razor to shave off the hair at the incision site little by little, and then disinfected the exposed skin with alcohol and iodine. I'm going to get ready for the operation. Yvonne glanced at Kaylan, and after the latter nodded, he picked up a scalpel from the metal plate on the side. The way Yvonne holds the knife is the pen-holding method. The advantages of this way of holding the knife are that it is easy to control, flexible in operation, and can complete some very fine movements. However, the disadvantage is that the force is completely dependent on the strength of the fingers, and is generally used to cut blood vessels and nerves. But for large and deep incisions such as amputation or disembowelment or craniotomy, it will seem a bit overwhelming. But this problem does not exist for Yvonne. After all, the hand he holds the knife is not a real human hand, but a mechanical prosthetic limb. The power that the prosthetic finger can emit is even greater than his own core muscles. The power of the crowd. With the sharp blade slashing down, the skin on the top of the wolf-like creature's skull was cut open smoothly. Kaylan, who was responsible for assisting, used retractors to pull the cut skin to both sides and fix it. Prevent it from closing again and affecting the operation of the surgeon. Ivan's hand did not stop. After cutting the skin, he cut into the subcutaneous tissue. Fortunately, the body of this wolf-like creature had just been taken out of the freezer, and there was not a lot of blood during the dissection. So even if there is no pump to suck out the blood in the laboratory, the operation can proceed smoothly. You look at the guy's subcutaneous tissue, skin, fascia, blood vessels, muscles, fat, are almost exactly the same as most mammals. Ivan placed the cut things on the plate in categories. Said to Kaylan. To be honest, even though this corpse has been frozen, the body tissue does not feel like it has cell walls. Is it possible that the cell walls we observed under the microscope are just a mutated cell membrane? It's hard to say. Ivan slowly shook his head. If there is a structural mutation at the cellular level, then the final form of this creature cannot be like this, even if it is a seed of erosion. Monsters, their cells are not as diverse as this creature. Kaylan naturally understood the meaning of Ivan's words. It was like building a house. One of the two architects used concrete as the building material, and the other chose wood as the building material. As a result, the two architects built a house. There is almost no difference in the appearance or interior structure of the resulting house. This is an absolutely impossible thing from an architectural or biological point of view. It's just that the answer to this question cannot be found by relying solely on the crude equipment in this laboratory. What Kaylan and Ivan want to confirm is another more straightforward thing. Ivan had already marked the skull of the wolf-like creature. He picked up the saw and drill, took a deep breath, and then drilled the drill bit into one of the marks. The heartbreaking sound of friction between metal and bone suddenly sounded. Both of them stared at the cutting position, not even daring to take a breath. Soon, a square incision with a side length of 3 centimeters appeared on the left side of the wolf-like creature's Tianling cap. The two of them looked at each other in unison. I'm about to witness the results, but I'm a little hesitant, Ivan said as if he was mocking himself. There's nothing to hesitate. Haven't we seen enough weird and unreasonable things? Kaylan whispered. Taking this opportunity, let's clarify the unspoken speculation just now, Ivan said. You say it first or I say it first? I suspect that this creature may not have an organ like a brain, Kaylan said bluntly. This is impossible. If there is no brain, then the various behaviors they exhibit cannot be explained by common sense. Ivan shook his head repeatedly. The brain they refer to here is not just the one used for thinking. The brain also includes the diencephalon, cerebellum, brainstem and other organs. These organs not only control the thinking and movement of living things, but even the operation of various parts of the body, ranging from heartbeat and breathing to hormone secretion and metabolism. These organs are needed to give orders. Without the brain, the organism will instantly fall into a state of out of control. Then what is your guess? Kaylan looked at Ivan and asked. Ivan hesitated for half a second before saying, although my reason tells me it's impossible, my guess is the same as yours. Since there are no nerve cells in other parts of the bodies of these creatures, then the brain is a completely useless thing to it. Since the signals sent by the brain cannot be conveyed to various parts of the body, then even if this creature originally had a brain, over time, this organ will it slowly deteriorates. But, Ivan continued, it's easier to do without a brain. If there is no cerebellum and brainstem, what is controlling the movement of the body, controlling its heartbeat, breathing, eating and excretion? Even if it is a robot, there must be a CPU, central processing unit, right? Perhaps, the organ below is its CPU. Kaylan pointed at the cut skull with tweezers and said, wouldn't you know if you open it? Ivan nodded solemnly. The tips of his mechanical fingers split into several petals, with a slender metal probe sandwiched between each two petals. He carefully inserted these needles along the cut gaps. Gently clamped the square piece of bone and slowly lifted up. Under the incision was a layer of pale fascia. Because of the freezing, the blood did not overflow. But perhaps it was for this reason that Kaylan had an illusion in his trance. It seemed that what they were dissecting was not a human body that had just been dissected. The corpse of a slain beast was instead a zombie that had been sealed for who knows how many thousands of years. It seems, it's hard. Kaylan poked the pale fascia with tweezers, and a hard touch came from the thing under the fascia, which made him feel a thump in his heart. Although the corpse had been frozen, but even the muscles were not so frozen. How could the brain tissue be as hard as stone? Of course, the premise is that the organ under this layer of fascia is the brain and not something else. Ivan did not answer, but took the smallest surgical tool and, with the help of tweezers and needles, cut open the thin fascia bit by bit. The things under the fascia were finally exposed to the two people's field of vision, but the two of them fell into silence for several seconds. Under the fascia, there is not brain tissue frozen into a lump of ice, but a crystal, a multifaceted crystal that is completely transparent and has a smooth surface. Although there are some differences from my guess, it's pretty much the same. Kaylan was the first to break the silence. This thing is a carbon-based creature, Ivan said with a slight twitch in the corner of his mouth. Except for the brain, other parts can be considered as carbon-based organisms, Kaylan said. Will the brain of a carbon-based creature be a crystal? Or, are these creatures actually robots? I am more inclined to the theory of modified creatures. The ones that can be imprisoned inside Yagonactor are obviously not ordinary beasts, Kaylan sighed. So far, we haven't done anything about it. It is clear what the purpose of this ancient battleship was. Is it a weapon, a colonial ship like the Ark, or a scientific research ship used to conduct various experiments? These wolf-like creatures are obviously not comparable to the crystallized lava beetles in the power room. The latter are more like immigrants who accidentally entered the battleship and then found a place that was extremely suitable for survival and settled there, and this group of wolf-like creatures is more like man-made creations that were deliberately kept in captivity in the battleship. But who keeps them in captivity? Alpha civilization? Or, the mysterious third civilization that built Yagonactor? There is really too little information at hand now. Logically speaking, Kaylan and the others should be ecstatic that such a major discovery has been made in the first phase of exploration, but for some reason, Kaylan is not happy at all. Stand up. An indescribable feeling of depression lingered in his heart. At this moment, Ivan suddenly let out a low cry. Kaylan quickly looked down and saw that the originally smooth, mirror-like surface of the crystal had turned into pits in just 10 seconds. This thing, it is degrading itself. Ivan suddenly became a little at a loss. How could this happen? Normal. Kaylan nodded. This can explain why we did not find this kind of crystal in those mutilated corpses, because all the exposed crystals have disappeared. What should we do now? Suture the incised fascia. Ivan tried to use a crochet hook to pull the fascia and wrap the crystal again, but he just used a little force and the crystal under the fascia suddenly broke. Turned into powder. Try freezing, Kaylan said, and had already walked around to the other end of the dissecting table, but before he could lift the body off the dissecting table, the crystal had completely disappeared, leaving only an empty cranial cavity. Record all these and send them back to the Ark together with the samples, Kaylan said to Ivan. There are not many samples left. Every time one is wasted, there will be one less opportunity for research. If I had known this would happen, if it's something, we shouldn't conduct an autopsy hastily. Crystals that degrade quickly when exposed to air, this is the only information we currently have. Ivan looked at Kaylan. Do you think of anything?